Well, hello everyone. Let me just set the timer. Okay. The game should be popping up now. Where is it? There it is. There's the game. Now, let me just make sure that I can see the stream chat on my phone. I mean, on OBS, my computer. On OBS. Wait, does my audio sound bad? I wonder why my audio sounds like that. I'm sorry about this. I just need to figure out why the audio sounds bad. It sounds good usually, but right now it's poopy. Looks like the Twitch ad break is over. I'll probably add an extra like 10 minutes to the countdown. Once I get the audio sorted. I think it's better now. It probably is. Okay, I think I'm good now. And the stream chat is working. Okay. Should be good now. Sorry about that. It was the EQ that I had. I think it was making me sound weird. Now we can actually start playing the game. Let me just add an extra 8 minutes to the countdown. There. Now, last time, a lot of things happened. We got introduced to the concept of megalomaniacs, which is a thing that came up in Chaos Head Noah, was the central premise. And then after that, Takuru tried to use what they think is telekinesis, but he can't figure out how to do it. All he knows is how to make the D sword appear. And then he and Hinae were like under a psychological attack because people in Shibuya have been putting the sumo stickers everywhere, and it was like they couldn't escape it. And then they got attacked by Minamizawa Senri, Kurusu Nono's childhood friend, who was being experimented on. at the Tokyo General Hospital. And then they went to the clinic to get patched up. Nono confessed that she's involved in all of this too. And then we cut to the detective's POV. Takeshi Shinjo's POV. I think that's it. All caught up. Which one is the correct one? This one. He'd learned and memorized the location of the facility from Kunosato. He snuck in from the ER loading zone and headed to the basement. The temperature there was clearly different from the areas above. And then he went to the autopsy room.
確かここに地下への入り口があると。
He opened the breaker box and saw the card reader inside.
こいつか。
He held out the card key that Kunosato had given him. And he heard these sounds of an opening door.
なるほどね。こりゃ尋常じゃないな。
There was a hidden staircase in the back of the autopsy room. A part of him hadn't believed it until he'd seen it for himself, but now he was essentially sure. A normal hospital wouldn't need something like this. Shinjo stopped for a moment to take a breath, then headed down the stairs. There was an old hallway at the bottom. It smelled like mold and dust. When he turned on his pen light, he saw that it was an old facility, and the walls were falling apart.
でも間違いなくここは使われている。
If no one visits a building, it rots away. Unless someone uses it every day, it won't last long. But this place was different. It was old, but he was nearly certain someone was using it.
確かこの先だと言ってたな。
Shinjo followed the directions that Kunosato had given him as he headed toward his goal. His first stop was the monitoring room, which would have been critical information on the facility. He wanted the data on the computer there. And then he wanted to find the room where the victims of the experiments were being kept. I wouldn't be surprised if this entire section has been cleared out. Let's see. He turned down many corridors as he headed for his destination. The cell-like rooms he saw on the way concerned him, but they could wait until later. Right now, his biggest job was to get the evidence he needed.
ここか。
Shinjo finally found the spot he was looking for. He used his card key to unlock the door. Then he swallowed and put his hand on the doorknob. What? When he got inside, he saw... Nothing? He quickly ran to the other room, the prison where Yamazoe Uke had kept the test subjects.
冗談じゃない。まさか。まさか。
It's definitely been cleared out. There's no way that they would just leave everything there after someone escaped. He quickly found the room and flung open the door. And then he stood still in astonishment. There was... nothing! Nothing there. No victims, no beds, none of the things that Kunosato had told him about. The monitoring room had been empty too. There were no security cameras, no computers, nothing at all. All that remained was the simple fact that there was nothing left at all.
Na, Miyashiro, 部活行くんだろ? もちろん、今日はいろいろと事件について整理したいんだ。
んじゃ、行こうぜ。
あ、悪いけど先行っててくれ。
なんだ、用でもあんのか？
用ってか、今日掃除当番。
I pointed to the other students removing the desks and sweeping the floors.
ああ。しかしなんで生徒に掃除とかさせるんだろうな。
確かにな。そもそも生徒が学校を掃除するなんて習慣があるのは日本を含めわずかな国だけで。
ああ、ストップ。一席ぶたなくていいから。んじゃ、後でな。
あ、たく。
Time to get this finished and head to the club room. I saw a scrap of paper lying on the floor next to the garbage bin. Someone had probably tried to throw it in the wastebasket and missed, then left it there. I really wish they'd think about the people that had to do the cleaning before they did that. I took a quick look around. There was another student named Tanaka-san right nearby who was mopping off the floor. Fortunately, there was no one else around. Okay, let's try this. I visualized the scrap of paper lifting off the ground. This was more difficult than you think. If you lost your concentration for even a moment, it wouldn't work. He talks like he's an expert, but he's never been able to deliberately use his psychic powers. I took the scene I'd imagined and tried to strike Tanaka-san with it. And then...
Yes.
The scrap of paper floated upward just like I'd imagined. And then it floated into the garbage can. Oh!
Nice.
Oh! I guess off-screen he was able to do it. To figure it out. I did a little victory pose. Tanaka-san was looking around in surprise. She looked at me, a little afraid.
ねえ、宮代くん。
あ、はい。なんですか？
今さ、なんか紙くずがね、勝手にゴミ箱に。
Time to gaslight her.
はあ。
手も触れてないのにゴミ箱に入ったっていうか、ね
え。まさか何かの見間違いじゃないですか？
うん、そうだよね。
Still, she stared at the garbage can, unsatisfied.
ゴミ捨ててきたいんですけど、いいですか？
ごめんね。
I took the garbage can out into the hallway. That was pretty reckless. Oh, we just hit chapter 7. Their resistance to, in time for the eroding past. Whoop. I almost read it. It had already been 3 days since Arimura and I had been attacked by the pyrokinetic. We've been worried that she might attack us again, but until now nothing had happened. Thanks to that, we'd finally calmed down, and today I was feeling good enough to revisit what we knew about the case.
まず話を始める前に紹介。
チャオス。いつもニコニコ笑顔が一番、有村ひなえです。これからよろしくね。こちらこそよろしく。
Pachi, pachi, pachi. It was still hard to keep up with the way her mood seemed to change all the time. Serika was applauding, but no one else was. Kazuki was playing ESO2 or some other game like she always did. She turned around to take one look at Arimura, then went back to her computer screen.
有村は別に新聞部に入るわけじゃなく、あくまで協力してくれるということで。
Yeah, she's already part of the student council, right? She wouldn't be joining this club. Downgrade.
一応所属は文芸部なんで、でもまあ固いことは抜きにして、とりあえず来れるときは顔出すってことで、どうか一つ
Oh, the literature club. I completely forgot. For what it was worth, I'd already told all the newspaper club members about Arimura's power.
ねえねえひなちゃん、ちょっと聞いていい？いいよ。あ、でも3サイズは乙女の秘密。
有村の3サイズは別にな。
おいこらてめえ貴様。
And then her mood changed again.
ひなちゃんってさ、どれが本当なの？明るかったり、真面目だったり、怖かったり。そうだな。どれだと思う？やだな。そこまで真剣に考え込まれてもな。ただね、一つ言えるとしたらさ、嘘か本当か分かっちゃうっていうのはセリが思ってる以上にずっと大変だってこと。こうやってふざけて。
Serika seemed lost in thought, as if she didn't really understand.
あ、そうそう、そこのあなた。
Kazuki jumped a little.
ねえねえ彼女、君さ1年だよね。あーごめん、できれば口に出して言ってもらえるかな。ああ、ひなちゃんダメだよ。はなちゃんは喋らないから。え、そうなの？それって喋れないってこと？
いいや、そういうわけじゃないはずなんだけど、とにかく喋りたがらねえんだよ。だから俺たちもまだ一回も和樹の喋ってるとこ聞いたことなかったりしてな。
へえ、そうなんだ。
Arimura stared at Kazuki's face.
オッケーオッケー。和樹はなちゃんでいいんだよね。ってことは花でオッケー？じゃあ花、これからよろしく。
Yoroshiku. I thought Arimura might have found it difficult to get along with Kazuki, but maybe I was wrong. Since Kazuki didn't talk, that might actually be easier for Arimura, since she didn't have to worry about knowing if she was lying.
それじゃあ早速始めるか。
待ってくれ。その前にもう一つ言っておかなきゃいけない。実はクルスが。
遅れちゃってごめんなさい。
Kurusu opened the door and came inside. Her injury had healed, and Dad had told her that it was okay for her to move around, so she'd come back to school today.
副部長。
もう話始まってる？
あ、いや、俺たちは別に例の事件についての話とかこれっぽっちも。
いいんだ伊藤。
あ？
クルスも一緒に事件の解明をしてくれることになった。
え、そうなのか？
ええ、みんなのお目付け役ってところね。
Kurusu glanced at me for just a moment, worried. But it was only for a moment, and then she went back to normal.
とにかくこれまでの事件について意見を聞かせてもらうわ。少しでもおかしなところがあれば遠慮なく指摘するからそのつもりで。
The meek attitude she'd had when she was hurt was gone, and now she was back to her usual self. Ito's shoulders slumped, but at the same time, he looked a little happy. She was always obnoxious, and at times a little annoying, but this is the way everyone wanted Kurusu to be.
じゃあ全員揃ったところでミーティングを始めようと思うんだけど、先に一つ見ておいてほしいものがあるんだ。
お、なんだ？
まだ尾上とクルスにしかちゃんと見せてない。成功率も 100% じゃないから失敗するかもしれないけど。
They looked at me in confusion. I nodded and grabbed a pen, then put it on the table. I tried my best to focus. And then, just like the scrap of paper earlier, I imagined the pen moving. As I focused as hard as I could, I saw it slowly appear in the corner of my eye. Now all that was left was to imagine my delusion infecting everyone else. The next moment, the pen started to jerk upward. The three of them raised their voices in surprise as the pen slowly moved upward. When I stopped imagining the floating pen, my D sword disappeared from my field of vision, and the pen slammed back down on the table.
おい、宮代、すげえよ。
言った通りまだ完璧じゃないんだけど。
いつの間にできるようになったんです？
尾上に協力してもらっていろいろとやってみたんだ。
Ito gasped in amazement. When the pyrokinetic attacked me, I was forced to accept that I really was a psychic. After that, I decided to master my power instead of running away from it, and I'd gone through a lot of trial and error to do so. At first, I tried to do it on my own, but that didn't go well. And then I remembered what Kunosato had said. She'd said that a Gigalomaniac could only real boot something by transmitting their delusions into the dead spots of another person's brain, to create what she'd called a shared reality, which meant that if I didn't have someone to share my delusion with, it would never work. So when I'd started practicing with Serika, things began to go much better.
でも先輩、言っておきますけど、そういうのいい気になって使ったりするとろくなことになりませんからね。有村さんの言う通りよ。
そのくらい分かってるよ。これは僕やみんなの身を守るためにやってるんだ。
ふーん、だったらいいんですけど。
I was telling the truth. I'd managed to turn back the pyrokinetic's flames at the last second. That was the only reason we survived. But that was just a fluke born out of desperation. If she was going to come after me again, I needed to master my power. That's why I decided to practice like this.
だけどさ、なんでだろうね。
Suddenly, Serika frowned. She was fiddling with her ghetto froggy strap, like she always did when she was thinking about something.
なんでだろうって何がだ？
相変わらずいきなりね、セリカは。あなたの頭の中では話がつながってるのかもしれないけど。ごめん。そのね、ほら、ひなちゃんは相手の話が嘘か本当かわかるんでしょ？で、タクは物が動かせる。人によって使える力に違いがあるのはなんでかなって。
I never thought about that before. She had a point. Why did different people have different powers? Kunosato hadn't said anything about that.
つうかさ、そもそもその能力自体いつからお前らに備わってたんだろうな。生まれつきか？
That was another thing I'd been wondering about.
宮代、お前はどうなんだ？
少なくとも僕自身はここ最近まで自分にそんな能力があることを自覚してなかった。
そんじゃあ有村は？
私は多分渋谷地震の後ですかね。あれ以降急に人の言葉の嘘が分かるようになったっていうか。
Right after the Shibuya earthquake?
ってことはあの地震に何か関係があるのか？
I'd have to look into that eventually.
あと今のセリの疑問、どうして人によって能力が違うのかって話だけど、それについてはなんとなく思ってることがあって。何？多分願望なんじゃないかなと。
願望？
そうです。私地震の時にちょっぴりそう思うことがありまして、で気づいたらこんな感じになってたっていう。そう思うことって？やだなあ、だから本当のことか知りたいって話。言わせないでよ、恥ずかしい。
いや別に照れるとこじゃねえだろ。
そもそも本当のことが知りたいなんて一体何があったんだよ。
やだ先輩、やらしい。
なんでそうなる？
Nosy pervert?
そういうのは痛いけな乙女の秘密なんですよ。だから聞いちゃダメ。ね。
When Arimura was like this, I knew I wasn't going to get anything out of her.
とにかく一旦これまでのことを整理してみようか。
Time for a
ニュージェネ
recap.
の凶器の再来事件。その被害者には明らかに共通するポイントがあったよな。
っていうとあれだね。
そう、前にも推測した通り全員何らかの能力者だということだ。最初の事件、こっちみんな被害者とその特徴は
predict the future.
そう、多分予知能力があったってことだ。次は音漏れたん。被害者とその特徴は
Put those who heard her music into a trance.
トランスっていうと歌を聴いた人の気持ちがうわーって気持ちよくなることかな。
まあそんなようなものですかね。
つまり相手の感情を歌で誘導できたってことだな。で、僕たちが目撃した回転デッド、被害者とその特徴は
Was able to... Which one was he again? I guess this one. Was said to be able to read clients' minds.
多分柿田って人はテレパシーを持っていたんだ。
ええ、その通りです。私にはそう言ってました。
そして学園祭で起きたごっつぁんです。被害者とその特徴は
Was able to get scoops with psychic powers.
そう、渡部が有名になったスクープ写真は全てありえない角度や場所から撮られているものばかりだった。多分念写だったんだろう。
やっぱり私が言った通りですよ。どの能力者も願望が入ってる気しませんか？
願望か。こっちみんなの大谷はもともとニコニア動画で生放送していて
He wanted to become famous. Yeah.
音漏れたんの高柳は新庄さんの話だと確か
Became a popular vocalist.
回転デッドの柿田さんは僕たちじゃわからないな。有村は何か知ってるか？
そういう話はあんまりしませんでした。けど仕事でいつも裏切りとか騙し合いとかあったみたいで。でも能力を持ってからはその心配もなくなったって。
Succeeded in business.
そしてごっつぁんですの渡部か。
Became a popular net reporter.
なるほどな。こうしてみると確かに有村の言う通りかもしれない。
つまり願望がその人の能力に影響してるっていうことね。
ってことは宮代のその能力も何かの願望が現れてるってことか？
手を触れずに物を動かせたらとか、そんな風に考えたことあるんですか、先輩？
いや、僕は
I couldn't think of any reason to have that
あ
power.
れじゃないタク。ほらあの時タクって地震の後ずっと寝込んでたじゃない？そういえばあの頃のタクルは歩くのも大変だったから。
Just like Kurusu said, I'd been badly injured during the earthquake. Even after I'd finally woken up from my coma, just walking was incredibly painful. It was bad enough that it would take tens of minutes just for me to grab something a few feet away. I'd hated that, and I wished 1,000 times that the thing I was trying to get would just come to me.
それじゃあ、あれが僕の能力に影響しているっていうことなのか。
なるほどな。願望が能力に現れる説ってのはほぼ正解と考えて良さそうだな。
それじゃああの女、僕たちを襲ったあの女の能力も何らかの願望ってことになるのか。
何かを燃やしたいと思ったってこと？
そこまで思い詰めるほど燃やしたいものって。
お芋とか？
Roast yams? Thank you, Serika, for the comic relief.
冗談言ってる場合かよ。
いえ、先輩。セリは本気でそう思ってます。
Oh!
マジか。
The lie detector has spoken.
なんかおかしなこと言った？
Yes. Yes, you did, Serika.
まあいい。あの女がどうしてパイロキネシスを持つようになったかは今は置いとこう。もう一つ、あの女について考えたいことがある。大事なことなんだ。
I looked at the faces of everyone in the room.
あいつがこれまでの猟奇殺人事件の犯人かどうかってことだ。
She'd clearly been trying to kill us, but that didn't mean that she was behind all the murders. I looked back at the board.
カズキ、例のものを頼め。
I took the image that I asked Kosuke to print out for me.
ニュージェネの狂気の再来の話題で埋もれてしまってるけど、ここ最近渋谷で連続放火事件が起きてる。
Everyone seemed to already know about this. They nodded.
それが起こった場所とこれまでの事件の場所を比較してみようと思うんだ。まず最初の事件、こっちみんな、現場はそれに連続放火事件の現場を重ねる。だろ。次は第2の事件、音漏れ炭。ここに連続放火事件の現場を重ねると、
おいおい、マジか。
Maybe she's trying to find the murderer. Like she's looking around and then she just sets shit on fire because she's an arsonist.
そして第3の事件、回転デッドが発生したラブホテル。このラブホテルの周りでも不審火が異常に発生してる。
確かに集中してるわね。
そうなんだ。そして第4の事件、ゴッツァンデスはみんなも知ってる通りこの学園で起こった。そしてそれに連続放火事件の現場を重ねてみると、
なんかすごいですね。
だろ。マップ全体を見てもらえばもっとよくわかる。最初にこれに気づいた時は僕も驚いたよ。で、これらのデータから考えると。
Hi, Bulb. How you doing?
ニュージェネの狂気の再来事件と不審火との間にはなんか関係があるかもしれない。
ああ、この通り偶然にしてはあまりにも場所が一致しすぎてる。あの女との因果関係を疑っていいんじゃないかと思う。
Good? Well, that's good. Hopefully my audio is okay. I was having some issues at the beginning of the stream. Oh, whoops. When I finished, Serika said, "Wow, you're amazing, Taku." But everyone else seemed lost in thought. How am I? I'm doing pretty good right now. A little hungry.
何か異論でもあるか？
異論とまではいかないけど、ちょっといいかしら。
I'm a little stressed out that the audio might be bad. Kurusu raised her head.
何でも言ってくれ。
She stood up in such a way as to not put pressure on her injury, and then moved in front of the board.
確認なんだけれど、タクルたちを襲った女の人の能力っていうのは
Pyrokinetic. The audio is perfectly fine. Thank God.
そう、炎を使う能力だったのよね。
あ
あ。でもこれまでの殺人事件では炎なんて一回も使われていないじゃない。
That's why I don't buy it that she's a serial killer. Thank you for the look, Fernea. Like, I think because the first thing that she said when she saw Takuru and Hinae was I found you, which says to me that she's been looking for someone, and that's why all the fires are concentrated around the murder site.
最初がこっちみんなだっけ？
Murder mystery, yeah. She's also trying to solve the murder mystery.
次が音漏れた？そして回転デッド。この学園で起こったのはごっつぁんですね。殺人事件にこんな名前をつけるなんて不謹慎だわ。
I also think it's disgusting, Kurusu.
ほら見て、どれも炎なんて出てこないでしょ。
あれれ、確かにそうだね。
Kurusu had caught on to one of the weak points in my argument. I thought that was strange too. None of the murders had involved fire, which meant that we had very little evidence to suggest that she was the killer.
なあ、こういうのはどうだ。発火女は自分の能力を試していたとか。
試す？
ああ、発火能力を身につけるまで自分で自分の能力がよく分かっていなくてさ、いろんなことを試してたんだ。それで殺害方法にいくつものパターンがあった。
なるほど。しんちゃん頭いいね。
Nah, because she's setting fire, so she obviously knows what her power is, because she's done it multiple times. Seneca was impressed, but
でもそれってちょっと無理ないですか？
Arimura has said it before I could.
そうか？
いくらなんでも強引すぎるかなって。
私もそう思うけど。
そうか。
Everyone fell silent. We'd only just started, but there was still too much we didn't know.
あの女が犯人だとするなら、なぜ炎を使わないで殺人を行ったのか。そしてなぜあんな殺し方ができたのか。いや、待てよ。
I suddenly got an idea.
なあ有村、ちょっと聞きたいんだけど。
なんです？
お前結構久野里さんと一緒にいたよな。
好きで一緒にいたわけじゃないですけどね。
Arimura's disgust was plain to see on her face. She must have really hated Kurusato-san.
久野里さんは能力について研究してるんだろ？何か言ってなかったか？ギガロマニアックスが持てる能力の数とか。
数ですか？
ああ、今まで気づかなかったけど、能力者は一人で一つの能力しか持つことができないとか決まってるんだろうか？
さあどうなんでしょう。でも確かにそんな制限久野里さんから聞いたことはないですね。
リアルブートの理屈から考えれば、妄想さえうまくコントロールできればどんな能力だって使えると思うんだよな。つまり一人で複数の能力を持つことも可能なんじゃないかってことなんだけど。
宮代たちを
Ito put his hand on his chin and lapsed into
襲
thought.
った女は単なるパイロキネシストじゃないってことか。
あくまでも可能性の一つだけど、どうだろう。
まだ決定的とは言えないわね。
Who would let her cheat like that?
だったらさ、犯人の女には別の能力を持った仲間がいるという可能性もあるんじゃないか。
仲間？ ああ、そっか。複数犯ってことだな。それとあとは、最初に戻ってしまうけど、パイロキネシストは事件とは無関係で、犯人は全く別の誰かという可能性。
その場合、タクルたちが襲われた事件とこれまでの連続殺人事件は別のものだと考える。
うん。
There were too many possibilities to really know what was going on.
ねえ、とりあえずこの件は保留にしない？多分結論は出ないわ。
そうだな。とりあえず今はこのまま置いとこう。
宮代と有村は警察に話したんだよな。お前らを。
はい。
警察から何か情報はないのか？
The night we were attacked, we contacted Shinjo-san and told him what had happened, along with a description of our attacker. Arimura had said she'd helped draw a composite sketch too. The police had decided to look for her as a suspect in the arson case. If they could find her, they'd arrest her for that. Once they had her in custody, then they could find out if she was responsible for the murders. Someone might be being framed? Maybe. I mean, the police don't have any suspects though, so if they're framing someone, they're doing a pretty bad job.
何か分かったら連絡をくれるはずなんだけど、特に何もない。女の特定に至ってないんだと思う。
そっか。じゃあ女に関する推理は今のところここまでしかできないな。
だと思う。
My throat was dry from all the talking, so I looked inside my bag. He's gonna take out a mountain view, not water. Yep. Of course, I'd brought a mountain view. I opened it and took a gulp. Ah. You said it. Just like me. Everyone else grabbed a drink of their own and took a moment to relax.
あともういくつか俺が気になってることを言ってもいいか？
うん、頼む。
まず一つ目な。被害者は全員能力者だよな。犯人はどうやってターゲットの能力者を見つけてるんだ？
Ito's question was a good one, and one I'd known was coming.
それについては一応考えてある。犯人は能力者を特定するために多分力士シールを使ってるんじゃないかと思うんだ。
力士シールを？
正確には11番目のロールシャッハ。AH 東京総合病院の地下にデータがあっただろ。あのシールを見せられた能力者は激しい反応を示すって。それは僕や有村も経験済みだ。
思い出しただけでちょっと。
Arimura closed her eyes and put her hand over her mouth. She must have felt like she was going to throw up.
大丈夫？有村さん。
はい。すみません。続けてください、宮代先輩。
ああ。で、伊藤や尾上は地下で見たと思うけど、街中のシールが監視されてたよな。カメラで能力者の素質がある人間を集めて、その地下施設で実験するために。
I could see Kurusu's expression cloud over. She probably remembered her friend Minamizawa Senri, who'd been a test subject down there. It hurt to see her like that, but I decided that I had no choice but to stay on the subject.
だから犯人はあの地下施設の出身者じゃないかと思うんだ。力士シールの秘密を知っていれば能力者の特定は容易だろ。シールを見て過剰反応を起こしてる人間を探し出せばいい。事実僕や有村も力士シールのせいでパニックに陥った時、あの女に狙われたわけだし。
じゃあ犯人は地下施設の監視カメラを利用してるっていうのか？それは無理。
それにもう廃墟みたいだったよ。シールの監視とかされてなかったし、実験もやってなかったし。
いや、あの施設にいなくてもシールの監視だけならできる。
え？
Kurusu nodded as if she understood.
タクルの言いたいこと分かったわ。カメラで監視してるとかじゃなく、実際にシールの近くで見張っていて、タクルや有村さんのような反応を見せた人を狙うのね。
そう、パイロキネシストの女もシールの近くに潜んで待ってたんじゃないかな。クモの巣に獲物がかかるのを待つように。そして僕と有村が見事に引っかかった。
そいつはしかし気の長い話だな。
でも不可能じゃない。
けどさ、
待って、その点に関しても今議論したって結論は出ないわ。保留にして次へ行きましょう。
保留ばっかりだね。いいのかな。
仕方ないわ。とにかく今は疑問点を出していくのが先だから。伊藤君、まだ気になることがあるのよね。
ああ、あと2つなんだけど。
Ito asked his two remaining questions. Summed up, this is what they were.
なぜ今回の事件はかつてのニュージェネ事件と同じ日付に起きているのか。そもそもその動機は何なのか。
なんだかまるで騒ぎになること自体が目的みたいにも見えるわね。
そうだな。
Everything, from the dates to the ways the murders were committed, was chosen to be as sensational as possible. Was it just to attract attention, or was it a message meant for a specific person?
それが犯行動機なんですかね。
私知ってるよ。愉快犯って言うんだよね、そういうの。
劇場型犯罪とも言うよな。
もしこの先もニュージェネ事件と同じ日付に犯行が行われるなら、次はノータリン事件と同じ日、10月23日ってことになるけど。
Which also meant nothing was going to happen until then.
なるほど、だからか。
What? Ito suddenly snapped his fingers as if he'd reached some great conclusion.
お前と有村さ、パイロキネシストに襲われたけど、結局女は宮代たちを殺さなかった。
ああ。
それって要するに殺す日じゃなかったってことじゃないかな。
Nah, it seemed like she was really trying to kill them. Like for real. But she got scared off.
殺す日じゃなかった。
Did that mean it wasn't my power that saved us? No, but it really felt like she was going to kill us. The more I thought about it, the more confused I felt.
それじゃあ私はそろそろ生徒会の方へ行くけど、くれぐれも私のいないところで危険なことはしちゃダメよ。約束してくれるわね。
そんな何回も念を押さなくても分かってるよ。
本当ね。
うん。
It had been a while since Kurusu had glared at me like that. Now that the Empress was back, she was scary.
ああ、そうそう。それからタクル、あなた。
Kurusu got up close and whispered to me.
今夜から青葉寮に帰ってきなさい。
え？
狙われているのかもしれないんでしょ。今の場所に一人でいては危険よ。ずっととは言わないわ。しばらくで構わない。事件が解決するまでうちで暮らしなさい。
いや、でもさ。
ダメ。問答無用。もし帰ってこなかったらこっちから連れに行くからね。それじゃ。
あ、ちょっと
Before I could say anything else, she ran off to the student council room.
生徒会長のくせに廊下を走っちゃダメだろ。
ん？副部長なんだって？
いや、別にこっちの話だよ。
She wanted me to go back to the dorm? What should I do? There was no real need to listen to her, but knowing Kurusu, she might really come barging into my RV.
しかしな、いくら考えてもわかんねえことばっかだったな。
そうですね。
なんか頭痛くなってきちゃったよ。ねえ、タク。タク？
ああ、そうだな。
We hadn't really learned anything today. We had no proof, just a bunch of guesses.
なあ、久野里さんに相談してみるってのはどうだ？
久野里さんか。
ほら、彼女なら俺たちの知らないこといろいろ知ってるんじゃねえのかなって。
ああ、それはやめといた方がいいっすよ。
Arimura-san shot down his idea.
なんで？
あれ言ってませんでしたっけ？あの人ってば私たちのこと人間だと思ってませんから。伊藤先輩だってあの人にひどい態度取られてたじゃないっすか。それともそういうの喜んじゃう系とか？だったら私もそうしてあげますけど。
だから俺はそういう趣味やねえっての。宮代と同じこと言うな。
Arimura had gotten the same idea about Ito that I had. I laughed a little, and then Arimura turned to us with a smile and continued.
別に冗談じゃないんですけどね。私、人の言ってることが本当かどうかわかるんですよ。久野里さん、私たちによくひどいこと言いますけど、本気で私たちが死ねばいいと思ってますから。
That really sucks. I wonder, she must have some trauma or something. To think so poorly of other people. That was a surprise. Does she really hate us that much? What did we do? Arimura continued on in the same chipper tone a girl might use to discuss after-school plans with a friend.
あの人の目には私たち害虫駆除のための実験台にしか見えてないみたいです。害虫と同じ扱いでいいんですか、伊藤先輩。
Whoops. I drank water. In a bad way. My bad. If I'm not choking on water at least once a day, then I'm sleeping. Is what I always say. After the meeting in the newspaper club ended, I bought a Mountain View at the vending machine in the cafeteria and sat down on a nearby bench. I've been thinking so much that I was exhausted. I opened the plastic bottle and gulped down the bubbling carbonation inside.
またそれ飲んでるのかよ。お前ほんと好きだな。
It's his favorite drink. What can he say? Ito bought a can of black coffee and sat down on the bench with me.
けどさっきはびっくりしたな。お前の能力だよ。
僕自身もまだ驚いてるけどな。
とにかく感心したっていうか、普通にかっこよかったぜ。
やめろって。男に言われても一つも嬉しくない。
That's something the heroine says to the male lead in a romantic comedy. And then the hero falls in love with them, maybe.
いや、それもないな。
A series of faces flitted through my mind. Serika with her dopey laugh, the ever-angry Kurusu, Kazuki playing ESO2, and Arimura with her acid tongue. But I couldn't imagine starting a romance with any of them.
なんだよ、せっかく褒めてやったのに。よっ。
Ito threw the empty can at the garbage bin.
あ、惜しい。
全然惜しくないだろ。
The garbage can had a lid and only a small hole to throw the cans in. Of course, there was no way he could get it inside.
Nana, またやってみせてくれないか？
何を？
だから、能力だよ。
Ito looked around the cafeteria as he spoke, making sure no one was too close to overhear him. Was this why he'd thrown the can? No choices. Neutral. Fortunately, it was after school and the cafeteria was just about to close, so there weren't many people in the room. There were only a few groups of people who were probably chatting about nothing important, and a few boys and girls intently reading their books. Nobody was paying attention to us. I didn't think anyone would see me and make a fuss, but...
お前ってどのくらいのものが動かせるんだ？重さとか大きさとか数とか。
その辺はまだテストしてないな。
じゃあ、狙いは正確なのか？ターゲット以外のものが動いちゃったりしないのか？
それもまだ。
He had a good point. It would be a good idea to test those things out. What should I do? No, now wasn't a good time. I still wasn't used to it and I was already exhausted. The idea of trying to focus even more didn't appeal to me.
今日はダメだ。また今度にしよう。
I leaned back on the bench and swallowed my Mountain Dew.
なんだよ、ケチだな。
ケチとかそういう問題じゃないんだって。
But it did seem like I'd need to test the limits of my power eventually, like Ito had said. I tossed a bottle of Mountain Dew into the garbage just like Ito had done a moment ago. Of course, it didn't even come close. It fell on the floor and started to roll. October 15th, 2015, Thursday. Tips. Medical examiner system. A legal system that allows for a coroner, as well as a doctor approved by the region's governor, to perform an autopsy on a body that died under suspicious circumstances in order to determine the cause of death. Currently, the system is only in place in Yokohama, Nagoya, Osaka, Kobe, and the 23 wards of Tokyo. Many people believe that Japan lags behind the rest of the world for this reason, and while calls for the system's expansion are voiced every year, there are still no signs that any change will actually take place. The medical examiner system. This system allows for an examination, or in some cases an autopsy, to determine the cause of death in accidents, or when a person has died from disease or an unknown cause. The work of the medical examiner is done as follows. In the event of an unusual death, the forensic officer first conducts an examination, which is followed by a death investigation from the medical examiner. Tips. Death investigation. The process of having a doctor determine the time and cause of a body's death. If the death is ruled to not be abnormal, a death certificate is created and the process ends there. However, if the death is ruled abnormal, the body is sent to be autopsies. If the cause of death can be determined, the body is then turned over to the family. If the death investigation fails to determine the cause of death, only then does the examiner conduct an autopsy. And if it is judged that a crime was involved, a further, more expansive judicial autopsy is conducted. But such an autopsy had already been performed on Wataba Tomoaki. It was extremely unusual for a second autopsy like this one to be performed.
どうだ？
Shinjo averted his eyes from the coroner's knife. He'd been to many judicial autopsies, but it was something he'd never gotten used to. He probably never would, he thought. As for the person standing next to the coroner, she was staring at the open skull without the slightest trace of disgust.
やはり肥大化の傾向が見られるな。
肥大化というと脳が？
この状況で他に何がある？解凍された頭を見て内臓の肥大がわかるとでも言うのか？
Shinjo's shoulders slumped a little. When he'd first met her, he'd been unsure of how to handle her, but now he actually felt kind of worried for her. Didn't that get tiring after a while?
さっき聞いた話じゃ、死因は間違いなく窒息死ということだったが。
窒息だけでこんな風にはならない。
ってことは、これまでの被害者と同じってわけか。
何しろ検体が少なすぎる。
わからないか。
知る方法ならあるにはあるがな。
何？
あの二人、宮代拓と有村ひなえの頭を開いて調べればいい。そうすればこれがギガロマニアックスに共通する症状なのかどうかわかるだろう。
No!
バカなことを言うなよ。そんなことできるわけがないだろう。
You cannot just do that. No.
冗談だ。今は CT や MRI があるんだ。わざわざ脳をむき出しにする必要もない。
Unfortunately, Kunosato, you are not funny. If that's a joke, it was really bad and misplaced.
なんだ。私が冗談を言うのがそんなに意外か？
いや。
Shinjo thought to himself that she probably hadn't been joking. He knew Kunosato Mio didn't like Gigalomaniacs. She hated them from the bottom of her heart. He didn't know why she despised them so much. Of course, there was probably a good reason for it, but he wished she would tone it down a little. They probably didn't become Gigalomaniacs by choice, and more than anything, he didn't want to lose their help with the case.
さて、これからどう捜査していったらいいんだろうな。
If there were still test subjects under the hospital, there were things the police could do. But when he'd gone down there, there wasn't a trace of anything left.
証拠ならあるだろ。
Funosato's voice was as cold as ever.
証拠？
何のためにあの娘を連れ出したと思ってるんだ。知ってることを全部吐かせろ。
おいおい、相手は子供だぞ。
子供じゃない。危険なギガロマニアックスだ。
Shinjo rubbed his temples, unsure of what to say. She's messed up, Kunosato. Real messed up. Free Asia Credit Bureau. Momose Katsuko sat in a reception room in a messy corner of her office and sighed as she ran her hand through her hair.
返してください。私を返してください。
No matter how many questions Momose asked her, or how she tried to get Uki to talk, that was the only answer she would give. Sometimes she tried asking if there was anything she wanted, or if she felt like eating anything. But the answer was always the same.
お願いです。返してください。
She hadn't made even the tiniest bit of progress since the girl had arrived. Even the endlessly patient Momose would want to sigh after all that. She still didn't know where this Yamazawa Uke girl was from, or how she'd ended up in that hospital. But from what she'd seen, there was a chance she'd endured significant abuse. And then she was suddenly rescued from it and taken to a completely different environment. So she must have been very confused. She knew from experience that victims like that needed to be treated very carefully.
私が早く帰らないと皆さんが困ってしまうんです。
She kept repeating the same lines like a broken audio player. Momose was starting to think it was time for a different approach. She didn't know what would happen if she told the girl this, so she'd kept it a secret until now.
ちゃんと話して現実を認識させてあげた方がいいかもしれない。
お願いです。私はあそこへ戻らないといけないんです。
しょうがない。話してみようか。
Once she'd made a decision, she didn't spend any time on second thoughts. This was both an advantage and a disadvantage.
ね、ウキちゃん。
はい。
そこまで帰りたいというのなら教えてあげるわ。
返してくれるんですね。ありがとうございます。
聞いて。あなたがどれだけ帰りたいと望んでももう無理なのよ。
無理。
だってあなたがいたあの場所、病院の地下にあったあの場所はもうなくなってしまったんだから。
Momose was relieved to finally see shock on Uki's face.
よかった。この子にはちゃんと普通の感情がある。
Like Kunosato had said, they hadn't done any operations on her that would destroy her ability to experience emotions.
この前ね、あなたがここへ来てからすぐに刑事、若いくせにくたびれた刑事いたでしょ。彼が例の病院へ行ってみたんですって。
The girl simply listened to Momose speak, her eyes wide. Momose kept talking, watching her carefully.
それでね、解剖室から地下へ行ったそうよ。あなたの。でもね、そこには何もなかったって。あなた。
そんな。じゃあ皆さんは、あそこにいた皆さんはい
なかったそうよ。誰も。
誰も。
Uki seemed to be trying her best to understand what Momose just said. And then...
嘘です。
そんな嘘ついて何になるの。本当のこと。
だってそれじゃあ私はどうすれば。私はどうすれば。
Tears started to silently fall from Uki's eyes. Poor kid. That's rough. Oh, Takuru is back at the dorm. Unexpected.
はは、どうしたタクル。新規臭い顔しやがって。
顔は生まれつきだよ。
は、なんで、もう少し面白いこと言ったらどうなんだ。
Dad was as jovial as ever. Without his lab coat, no one would ever believe he was a doctor.
どうだ、やっぱ自分の家が一番落ち着くだろ
う。別にそうでも。
ま、一人暮らしを始めたばっかじゃまだそうは思えないか。でもな、いずれわかる時が来るもんだ。我が家が一番ってな。
In the end, I'd come back here to Elba dorm, because Kurusu had told me to do so at school.
狙われているのかもしれないんでしょ。今の場所に一人でいては危険よ。ずっととは言わないわ。しばらくで構わない。事件が解決するまでうちで暮らしなさい。
I wasn't her slave or anything, but just like she said, it was dangerous to be by myself right now. Especially when we didn't know who the killer was or what they were after. If someone was nearby, it would be easier to get a hold of Shinjo-san and his allies if I needed to. And I was probably never going to be able to tell this to Kurusu, but the feelings I'd felt when I left home were starting to disappear. After seeing Kurusu get hurt and try to protect me, and even cry for my sake despite being such a strong girl, I started to understand some things that I hadn't realized when I'd left. I realized what I was thinking and shook my head. No way. I wasn't like Yuto, who could never seem to get away from his sister.
おい、何赤くなってんだよ。
なんでもない。
When you're thinking you embarrass yourself.
とにかくさっさと荷物置いてこい。お前の部屋はノノのやつがちゃんと掃除してくれてる。
Dad didn't get mad when I'd left or when I'd come back. Come to think of it, he'd only said one thing on the day I'd left.
そうせざるを得なかったノノの気持ちがわかるようになったら戻ってこい。じゃあな。
荷物置いてくる。
ねえ父さん、タクル兄が帰ってくるって。
As I went to my room, Yui suddenly appeared. I could see Yuto behind her.
おう、タクルならもう帰ってきてんぞ。
Yui's face almost broke into a broad smile when she saw me, but she quickly forced herself to assume a strict expression.
何やってんの？
え？
お風呂とキッチンと廊下の掃除。タクル兄が当番の時、私とユウが代わりにやってたんだから。
悪い。
I apologized without thinking.
これからしばらく私たちの当番、タクル兄が代わってよね。いい？
おう。
タクル兄ちゃん、別にいいよ。僕気にしてないから。
ダメ。こういうことはきちんとしなきゃいけないんだから。親しき仲にもって言うでしょ。
でもそんなこと言ったらタクル兄ちゃんまたどこか行っちゃうよ。せっかく帰ってきたのに。
ダメなものはダメなの。
なあタクル、ユイのやつノノに似てきたと思うか？
うん、特に怒ってる顔が。
なんか言った？
いえ、なんでもないです。ごめんなさい。
Wow. Yui put her hands on her hips and puffed up her flat chest to glare at me. She did look just like Kurusu when she did that.
もう父さんが甘やかすからタクル兄は勝手なことばっかり。
おっと、今度はこっちに飛び火か。
で、タクル兄、もうどこにも行ったりしないんでしょうね。
いや、その。
タクル兄がいなくなってどれだけノノ姉が悲しんでたか分かってる？ユウだってすっごく寂しがってたんだから。
そっか。
私も。私は別に何でもなかったけど。
And suddenly the expression on her face changed.
何でもなかったけど。
おい。
Aww, she's crying now.
ゆい
Stop that. I'm not good with this stuff. I can't handle it when people cry. Yui covered her face with her hands and then ran into her room. Ryuto followed quickly after her. Dad scratched his head inside a little as he saw them go.
ほら、さっさと荷物置いてこい、タクル。
わかった。
I got away as quickly as I could. That scared me. I didn't expect Yui to start crying all of a sudden. I thought nothing would really change around here even if I left. But did they really want me here that much? If they did.
いや、でも。
As I sat there lost in thought, I was suddenly startled by a knock at the door.
誰だ？
タクル兄ちゃん。
ユウトか。
そのノノ姉ちゃんが着替えたら降りてこいってご飯だって。
サンキュー。どうした？さ、
ゆいお姉ちゃんのことだけど。
Yuto crossed his hands over his stomach and fidgeted as he looked up at me.
お姉ちゃん、なんかいろいろ怒ってたけど、本当はずっとタクル兄ちゃんに帰ってきてほしいって言ってて、だから怒ってたのは本気じゃなくって。
大丈夫。わかってるよ。
本当？
だから先に降りててくれ。すぐに着替えていくから。
Yuto looked a little relieved as he left the room.
ユウトはちょっと背が伸びたな。
Yuto and Yui had come here at almost the same... Yuto and Yui had come here at almost the exact same time that I had.
一緒に暮らし始めた頃はどうなるかと思ったけど。
The Shibuya earthquake hadn't just taken their parents from them, it had caused them severe psychological trauma. During the earthquake, Yuto had been trapped in a dark place for a long time, all by himself. As a result, he was still terrified of darkness and being alone. That was why he still clung to his sister. And Yui, after the nightmarish incident she'd gone through after the earthquake, she'd become incredibly afraid of men. She was even afraid of me at first. But over time, we started to open up to one another. When I'd left, they seemed to be doing a lot better. And now, Yui had her act together even more. Yuto was still young, but he did seem a little more grown up than he had before. And even if the world didn't look like it had changed, time was still passing. But what about me? Had I changed?
はい、そろそろいいわよ。
それじゃあいただきます。
いただきます。
おほー、すき焼きなんて久しぶりじゃねえか。
何言ってるの、先月もやったじゃない。
あのなあ、あれは鶏肉だっただろう。牛肉じゃないとすき焼きとは言わねえんだ。
そんな贅沢をする余裕うちにはありま。
誰かさんが困ってる人から治療費なんか取れるかとか言っちゃうから。ま、別にいいんだけど。
そういう言い方はねえだろう。もっと尊敬しろ、尊敬。
はいはい。
ほらタクル、お椀貸しなさい。よそってあげるから。
Kurusu reached out her hand toward me.
いいよ。
ダメ。あなた最近ちゃんと食事してなかったんでしょ。遠慮なんてしないの。
Kurusu grabbed the bowl from me and heaped the beaten egg high with meat and vegetables.
はい、ちゃんと食べるのよ。
ああ。
タクルに、こっちにもお肉あるから。はい。
もういいって。
何？のの姉のお肉は食べられても私のは食べられないっていうわけ？
お前酔っ払いのおっさんかよ。
That's weird. That's a weird thing for a child to say.
おい、ちょっと待てお前ら。もう肉ないじゃねえか。
こういうのは早い者勝ちだっていつも父さん言ってるじゃん。
言ってるじゃん。
だからもうちょっと尊敬をだな。
Everyone was seated around a single pot eating dinner. I thought that the only point of dinner was to eat until you were full, but...
タクル、ユウト、お肉のおかわりまだ冷蔵庫にあるからね。たくさん食べて。
おいこら。
父さんは少し痩せないとだ。
俺はお前をそんな娘に育てた覚えはないんだがな。
覚えがなくても育っちゃったんだから諦めて。
Part of me enjoyed sitting around the table and listening to everyone talk. What? No, that wasn't true. I definitely wasn't homesick. Maybe it was just that having someone near me made me feel better. Maybe it was having Kurusu offer to help me when I'd been in trouble on my own. But it definitely wasn't that I was happy to be home or glad to have come back to where I belonged.
タクルにってば。
あ、何？
お茶いるの？いらないの？さっきから聞いてるのに全然答えてくれないんだもん。
ああ、ごめん。
そいつのことだ。どうせまた難しいへりくつでもこねくり回してたんだろう。
Word.
へりくつってなんだよ。僕はいつも理路整然と正しい思考を。
No, that's a lie.
はい、ストップ。そんなこといいからお茶は？
ああ、できればマウンテンビューを。
うちには置いてません。
ん？ユウトったらどうしたの？ニコニコして。
うん。やっぱりみんな揃ってた方が楽しいなって。のの姉ちゃんだってすっごく嬉しそうだよ。
そう？そうね。そうかもね。
practicing? It didn't work. I'd gotten a lot better at seeing my D sword, but I still didn't know how to take hold of it. I asked Arimura for help, but her answers weren't really helpful. Unlike with my psychokinesis, all I needed to do was draw my D sword from the Duroc Sea. I should have been able to do it without needing someone nearby. But when I was by myself, it was just an illusion. Unless I real booted it, I wouldn't be able to use it to attack or defend. If I wanted to use it as a weapon, I needed to share the delusion with someone else, just like with my other power. At least, that's what Arimura has said. But before that, I need to be able to take hold of it.
くそ、もう一回。ここから腕を伸ばして、剣のイメージを固定化って。くそ。
Whenever I tried to get close to my D sword, it moved away from me like a mirage. If I just flailed my arm at it, I couldn't reach it.
手がつる。
タクル入るわよ。
あ、
You shouldn't just walk into someone's room without waiting for them to tell you to come in. That's just rude. I had my hand stretched out like a TV hero in the middle of his transformation. And Kurusu was staring at me, her eyes wide.
違うんだ。ユートに新しいヒーローの変身ポーズをだな。
ユートはもう卒業したわよ、そういうの。
ああ、そうだっけ。
Kurusu put her hand on her cheek and sighed.
もし自分が本物のヒーローになれると思ってるなら、やめておきなさい。
そんなこと思ってないよ。僕いくつだと。
いくつになっても子供なんだから、タクルは。
And then she stared into my eyes. I could tell that she wasn't blaming me and that she was genuinely concerned.
タクル、ちょっとそこに座って。
いや、これから風呂に入ろうかなと。
いいから座りましょうね。
あ、はい。
I sat down on the bed as I was told.
タクル。
Kurusu took a step toward the bed and looked down over me. Humans are strange creatures. Whenever someone looks down on us, they seem bigger and more powerful. I quickly stood up and looked down over her instead. Oh, he didn't want to feel weak? Weak shit, Takuru. When I first met her, she was almost at eye level with me, but now...
これは別にやましいことをするための訓練じゃない。
能力のせいで狙われているのに、そうやってむやみに使おうとするのは。
逆だよ。もっとちゃんと使えるようになれば自分の身も守れるし、もしもの時は新聞部や青葉寮のみんなのことだって助けられる。
だからそういうのは警察の仕事でしょ。
今回の事件、いざって時に警察に何かできるとは思えない。
He has a point.
けど
クルスこそよく口にするじゃないか。僕らのことを守るとかなんとか。でも能力者が襲ってきたらどうするつもりなんだ？
I just realized that Windows put a little ad on my taskbar for baseball. That's some shit.
それは。
ほら見ろ。やっぱり僕が能力を磨くしかないんだよ。
Kurusu stared down at her face silently. Then she raised her head and looked me in the eye.
ねえタクル、私はあなたのことをずっと見てきたわ。だからわかるの。あなたがこの先何を考えるか。
この先？
タクルはね、必ず自分を危険にさらすようなことをする。例えば自分の力で犯人を捕まえてやろうとか。
I gulped. Bingo. I hadn't really thought about it yet, but knowing me, I'd definitely think that.
なんだよ。能力者でもないくせに余地か。
いつも言ってるでしょ。能力なんかなくてもね、タクルの行動は簡単に読めちゃうって。とにかくお願い、自分の身を守ることだけ考えてね、タクル。お願い。
ああ。
じゃあ約束の指切りね。
Pinky swear? Like we're little kids? No way, that's embarrassing.
嘘ついたら針を1000本飲ますどころじゃ済まさないから。
Stick a needle in your eye? And that's really scary. What? What? Then the heavens intervened to save me, and a phone rang out like the Yalar horn? What is that? A horn held by the god who guards the bridge of the gods in Norse mythology. Its bellow was said to herald the arrival of Ragnarok. Okay. Oh, whoops. I almost exited out. Lost all my progress. I hadn't gotten a new one yet, so of course it was Kurusu's.
出なくていいのか。
今はあなたと話をしているところでしょ。
でも事件に関係あることかもしれないし。
She must have thought it might be right because she took out the phone and looked at the screen. And then she looked concerned.
新庄さんだわ。
Huh? I'd only said it to distract her, but evidently the call really did have something to do with the case. She quickly hit the answer button and put the phone up to her ear. I watched her, nervously.
もしもし、クルスです。はい。はい。
On the other side of the phone, I could hear a note of concern in Shinjo's voice. I couldn't tell for sure, but he seemed to be saying that someone had gone missing.
いいえ、来てません。だいたいこの家を知らないはずですし。タクルが？
What? Uki? Uki probably ran away from Momose-san. What? What did I do? Kurusu moved the phone away from her ear and turned back toward me.
山添さんって子、知ってるわよね。
Yep, she definitely ran away.
ああ、例の病院の地下室から助け出した子だよ。
その子がね、行方不明なんですって。
She went missing?
タクルが連れ出したりしてないかって。
そんなわけないだろ。今日はクルスたちとずっと一緒だったじゃないか。
そうよね。
ちょっと貸してくれ。新庄さんと話したい。
I reached my hand toward the phone. Shinjo-san had given me the location of an office in a multi-purpose building in Sakuragaoka-cho. There were rows of desks there, stacked high with paper that I normally would have considered a cornucopia of information. But I didn't have time to worry about them now. I rushed up to Shinjo-san as soon as I saw him.
あの子がいなくなったって、誘拐されたんですか？警察がついててどうして？
いや、電話でも言ったけど、そうじゃなくて。
でも彼女がいなくなったのは事実ですよね。
ちょっとタクル、やめて。どうしたの？
悪い。
Yamazoe Uki had reminded me a little too much of Minamizawa Senri, and I'd lost control of myself. Kurusu quickly moved to stop me. By the way, Kurusu had come to keep an eye on me, in her words, to make sure I didn't do anything stupid.
とにかく誘拐とかそういうんじゃないんだ。いきなり姿が見えなくなってしまって。
だからそれが誘拐されたってことじゃん。
それはないわ。だってこの部屋には私と新庄ちゃん、それにミオちゃんの3人が一緒にいたんだもの。
Momose-san, the CEO of Freesia, had been looking confused and concerned ever since I'd arrived. When I'd first met her the night we snuck into A8 Tokyo General Hospital, she seemed like a loud, boisterous sort of woman, but now she seemed kind of tired.
彼女をソファーに座らせて、 俺たちはこっちで話をしてたんだよ。で、ふとソファーを見たら彼女がいなくなっていた。
トイレとかじゃないんですか？
Kurusu pointed to the toilets in the back, but Shinjo-san put his hand on his forehead, thinking, and said,
真っ先に探したよ。でもどこにもいなくてね。それどころか窓やドアすら開けた形跡がない。
she either turned invisible or she teleported out of there.
考えられることは一つだ。彼女はギガロマニアックスだからな。能力を使って。
能力？
Come to think of it, I still hadn't asked. What power did Yamazawa Uki have?
テレポーテーションとかそういう？
Me and Takuru are on the same wavelength right now. Teleportation. Oh, whoops.
よくわからない。
Furusato whispered an answer, her voice full of hate without even bothering to look back at me.
わからないって。
ああ、彼女、俺たちの質問にほとんど応じる様子がなくてね。能力に関しては久野里さんが探ろうとしたんだが無駄だった。
そもそも瞬間移動だとすれば、とうの昔にここを抜け出していたはずだ。だが、あいつはそうしなかった。
ただ、ウキ君は少し特殊なようだ。今回はそれにやられたらしい。
特殊？
私ね、少し前から考えていたのよ。ウキちゃんを一度どこかの児童養護施設に預けた方がいいかもしれないって。それでさっき新庄ちゃんとミオちゃんに提案したら快く OK をもらって。
俺は OK なんか出してません。
Oh!
私もです。
ちょっと黙っててちょうだい。こんがらがっちゃうから。
No, I think that's really important that they just said that they didn't agree, but you're saying that they did agree. Momose-san motioned for them to be quiet.
とにかく OK をもらったの。それで私はウキちゃんを連れて駐車場に降りて車に乗せようとしたわけ。知り合いの施設に相談してみようって。
じゃあ彼女を連れ出したのは百瀬さんじゃないですか。
So why was everyone so upset that she disappeared? Momose-san had taken her outside. There was no mystery there. As Kurusu and I stood there with our mouths hanging open, Shinjo-san interrupted.
という夢を見たんだそうだ。
は？夢？
違うわ。あれは絶対にあったことよ。だってウキちゃんの手の感触とか車のエンジンをかけた感覚とか全部リアルに残ってるもの。
けどウキ君を自動車に乗せようとした途端我に返ったんですよね。そしたら百瀬さんは事務所の中にいて俺たちと話をしている最中だった。
This is really interesting. What the fuck happened? Momose-san thinks that she convinced them to take Uki-chan to like an orphanage, and that she took her to a car so that she would be sent there, and it didn't really happen. That's interesting.
ええ、そうなの。
俺たちは児童養護施設の話なんて提案されてないし、ウキ君と百瀬さんがここから出ていくのも見ていません。百瀬さんとは、なのにウキ君は部屋からいきなり消えた。
どういうことですか？よくわかりません。多分それが山沢由紀の能力なんだろう。彼女を捕獲したら改めて調べてみよ
う。What's the power? Funosato-san's use of the word capture pissed me off. Oh yeah, she's referring to this child as if she's like some sort of monster or like a beast or something. I could tell that, like Arimura-san. Whoops. I could tell that, like Arimura said, she didn't even think of us as humans. But she didn't have to talk that way about a little girl, did she? Even if she didn't like psychics, did she have to go that far? I glared at her, but Kurusato-san didn't seem bothered in the slightest.
ウキ君の行き先ですけど、 宮代くんたちが知らないとなると、あとはあそこしか考え。
私も今そう思ってたところ。
She went back to the hospital.
もしそうだとすれば少しばかり骨が折れるな。
どこなんですかそれ。
Shinjo-san answered me with a bitter sigh.
君もよく知ってるところだよ。あの子の元の家だ。
え、まさか
うん、ふきちゃんたらね、あそこへ返してくれの一点張りだったのよ。
あんな地獄みたいな場所に一体なんで。
さてな、とにかく厄介なことになる前に取り戻さないとな。
タクル、ねえタクル。
見つかったらどうするんだよ。
An hour had passed since we'd first spoken to Momose-san at Freesia. Kurusu and I were hiding behind some plants near AH Tokyo General Hospital.
新庄さんたちに任せないとダメよ。私たちみたいな素人が出しゃばったりしたら。
それじゃダメなんだ。山添雨季って子は僕が見つけて青バリオへ連れて帰る。
どうして。
彼女、今の久野里さんには渡せない。
I was gritting my teeth hard in anger.
タクル。
Afterward, Shinjo-san, Momose-san, and Kunosato-san had started to come up with a plan to get inside the basement of the hospital. Of course, they weren't going to let us come along. We were told to go home, and at first, that was my plan. But then things changed. Kunosato-san said that she wasn't going to send Yamazoe Uki to an orphanage, but to a research center she was affiliated with. She said that they were going to research her power there. However, Kunosato-san had treated not only Arimura and I, but also little Uki, as nothing more than guinea pigs, and I'd heard her use the word capture many times.
あの子は苦しい実験から解放されて、やっと地下から出られたっていうのに。
Was Kunosato-san just going to send her right back to the same old life she'd experienced before? Just imagining it terrified me, and it made me come to a decision. I'll save her.
もしここであの子を見放したら、また同じことの繰り返しだ。またこの場所で誰かを見捨てることになってしまう。昔僕はクルスの親友だった南沢千里を見捨てて逃げた。それを今でも後悔してる。あの山添って子も実験の犠牲者だ。だから今度こそ僕は助けたい。そんなことくらいで南沢千里が許してくれるとは思わないけど、でも助けたいんだ。
Kurusu's voice sounded choked up. She must have been remembering what happened to her best friend.
タクル、あのね。
え？
本当は千里は
彼女のこと何か知ってるのか？おい、クルス。
ごめんなさい。気が動転してしまって。千里はね、渋谷地震で死んだの。あなたのせいじゃないわ。絶対に違う。
クルス。
だからタクルが責任を感じ続ける必要なんてないの。忘れていいのよね。
Kurusu looked down at her feet. When she did, her hair covered her eyes, and I couldn't tell what she was thinking.
今クルスは何を言いかけて何を言いやめたんだろう。
Just as I was about to ask, I heard soft footsteps.
来た。
Momose-san's van was in the same alley where she'd picked us up before. They'd been watching the hospital for a while now. I saw two shadows that probably belonged to Shinjo-san and Kurosato-san leave the van and run onto the grounds.
クルス、向こうが動いた。大丈夫か？
I tapped her on the shoulder and she looked up, and I was reminded of why they called her the Empress of Hekiho Academy. There was no trace of the sadness that had been there a moment ago.
ごめんね。ちょっと千里を思い出しちゃって。でももう平気よ。
本当はここで待っててもらいたいんだけど。
But I couldn't real boot on my own. I needed a partner no matter what.
何言ってるの。あなたのことを心配しながら待ってるなんて、こっちからお断りよ。
だと思った。
We followed Shinjo-san and Kunosato-san from a distance. A moment later, they had pressed themselves up against the wall near the rear emergency entrance. Even from a distance, I could tell it was more heavily secured than before. The lock seemed to be a newer and sturdier model. But Shinjo-san must have already had the key because he took something out of his pocket and started to put it in the lock.
あそこから入るつもりだ
All
な。
right then. I quickly created an image in my mind. I looked at the key-like object he was holding and envisioned it flying away.
やっぱりもっと訓練しとくんだった。
The more I started to panic, the more I lost focus. I couldn't make the delusion clear in my mind.
くそ。落ち着け。大丈夫だ。落ち着け。よし、見えた。
I could see my D sword floating in front of me.
クルス、ちょっと脳を使わせてもらうな。
どうぞ。っていうのもなんか変だけど。
It's a very strange thing to say. I imagined the delusion I'd come up with going inside Kurusu, Shinjo-san, and Kunosato-san's minds. Kurusu gasped a little. She must have felt something. The delusion was shared between us, and instantly the real boot was completed. Clang! The metallic object in Shinjo-san's hand rolled away and hit the ground with a clang. Then I heard the two of them gasp. The key rolled along the ground in a very unnatural way until it rolled down a metal sewer grate. Just like I'd imagined.
よし。
バカ、隠れてたくる。
Celebrating too hard there. Just as I was about to make a victory pose. Yeah, don't do that. You're trying to be conspicuous. You're not trying to get found out. Kurusu grabbed my hand and pulled me back. A victory pose. What the fuck? Then she dragged me down onto the ground.
悪い。
調子に乗らないの。これだから私がついてないとダメなのよ。
Her hand was shaking a little. She was probably still scared of my power no matter how many times she saw it. That was how most people would react. I hesitated for a moment, then gripped her hand in return. Then I let it go and looked over at Shinjo-san and Kunosato-san. The two of them whispered to each other, and then silently headed back toward the van.
今だ。
We crouched low as we headed for the emergency entrance. Then we reached the door. When we reached the door, I turned around toward Kurusu. She caught up a moment later, but her breathing was a little heavy.
すまない。ちょっと早かった。
こっちこそごめん。もっと運動が得意ならよかったんだけど。鍵開けられるの？
多分。クルス、もう一回。いや、何回かやるよ。悪いけど。
構わないわ。そのために来てるんだから。
I stared at the door. The lock was stronger than before, probably because of the time we'd broken in. I imagined the lock flipping and the door opening. There was a heavy click and the door opened like I'd imagined. Thanks to my power, we were able to make it inside with no trouble. I remembered the route to the room where we'd found Yamazawa Uke, so we headed there. But as we walked through the darkness, I saw that Kurusu was acting a little strange.
大丈夫か？
実はちょっと閉所恐怖症がね。でも平気。気にしないで。
平気ってすごい汗だぞ。
And then I realized something.
まさか傷が痛むのか？
She seemed like she was okay, but it had been a really bad injury. It couldn't have fully healed up by now.
おい、クルス。
平気だから。ほら、急ぎましょう。
She pushed me onward before I could stop.
もうちょっとだ。あと少しで例の部屋だから我慢してくれ。
ええ。
That's right. It was right around this corner. Aww. Suddenly we heard a voice sobbing in the darkness. Kurusu and I almost leapt into each other's arms. Oh, this poor kid. It was the voice of a little girl.
Takuru, この声。
Was it a ghost? Was it a ghost? Come on, dude. He's so scared. No, that was dumb. You think? It was a little silly. Which meant it had to be. Kurusu and I nodded and stepped toward the direction of the room. Just like Shinjo-san had said, the room was completely empty. The beds and the patients that had been confined there were all gone. It was just an empty room now. And standing in the middle of the empty room was a sobbing Yamazawa Yuki. How long had she been there? She was crying like a child who'd lost their mother.
Hinae. 誰もいない。誰か返事して。
Kurusu couldn't bear to watch. She ran over and gave the girl a big hug. Kurusu started crying not long after, too.
今までよく頑張ったね。でももういいの。だからお家へ帰ろうね。
But Yamazawa must not have heard her because she just stood there, crying silently for a long, long time. The whole time, there was nothing I could do but watch.
大丈夫？変わりましょうか、タクル。
いいよ。もう目の前だから。
When we finally made it back to Aoba dorm, I took Yamazawa Yuki off my back and put her on the sofa. And then I lied down flat on the floor with my arms and legs stretched out. She wasn't even that heavy. I was just out of shape.
だから変わるって言ったのに。
運動音痴に任せたら落っことすかもしれないだろう。
失礼ね。そこまで言われるほどひどくないわ。それにタクルよりマシだと思うんですけど。
Kurusu's eyes were red-rimmed. Her face was red from where she tried to rub away the tears. She must have been embarrassed by it because she turned away from me and said something mean.
はいはい、わかったよ。その子のこと、父さんに。
あ、うん、そうね。
After Kurusu left to get him, I lifted my tired body off the floor and onto the sofa. As I'd expected, Yamazawa hated the idea of leaving the basement. But after Kurusu's fervent attempts at persuasion, and my own insistence that nobody was coming back to the basement, she finally clung to Kurusu and started to break down. And as I carried her on my back, she'd gotten tired and fallen asleep.
この子の家族は一体どうしたんだろう。本当の家は、学校は。
I hadn't had a chance to look the first time we'd gone into the basement, and that data was probably long gone by now.
父さん、今上がってくるって。
うん。
Kurusu sat next to Yamazawa on the sofa and softly stroked her hair.
この子、捜索願いとか出てないのかしら。
新庄さんの話だと、今のところ該当するデータはないって。
そう。
やっぱり渋谷地震のせいかもしれないな。
After the earthquake, more data on missing persons and casualties had gone missing than you could imagine. And to top that off, this year had seen the largest solar storm in history affect all kinds of electronic devices. Shibuya hadn't been hit that hard, but a lot of data in other regions had been lost.
分かってるのは名前だけか。せめて手がかりでも持っていればいいんだけど。
ののね、タクル兄
何かあったの？
The door opened. Yui and Yuto speak. What? Why do I keep saying that? Yui and Yuto peeked inside.
Shh.
The two of them froze next to the door.
まだ寝てなかったの、二人とも。
寝ようと思ってたらのの姉たちの声が聞こえたから。
大丈夫？また喧嘩とかしてない？
Kurusu and I looked at each other without thinking.
大丈夫よ。私たち喧嘩なんてしてないから。
本当？だったらいいんだけど。
Suddenly, Yui stopped. She saw the girl sleeping on the sofa and her eyes went wide. I thought that she was just surprised to see a strange girl sleeping on the sofa, but
ウキちゃん？
she said something we'd never expected.
どうしてウキちゃんがここに？
ゆい、知ってるの？この子のこと。
うん、多分。あ、でも待って、そんなはず。
Yui walked over to the sofa and sat down next to Kurusu, and then she stared at Yamazawa Yuki.
ごめん、私の勘違いかも。
Huh?
いや、勘違いじゃない。確かにこの子はウキって名前で。
だっておかしいよ。昔のままの姿なんて、そんなの絶対に
変。昔のままって？
ウキちゃん、私のクラスメートだったんだよ。小学校2年の時の。
Oh. Oh, she hasn't aged. And the next morning.
もう一度整理するぞ。名前は山添ウキ。年齢はユイと一緒だから13もしくは14歳。
うん。
Dad was filling out what looked like a medical chart on his computer.
小学校2年の時にユイと同じクラスだった。だが渋谷地震の少し前から学校に来なくなり、その後どうなったかはユイも。
そう。
で、彼女はその頃、つまり6年前と見た目が全く変わってないとユイは言うんだな。
うん、絶対に変わってないと思う。一応証拠も見つけてきたんだ。
Yui showed us a photo. It was a class photo from her school. I could see a young Yui in a row of children, and in the front row next to the teacher, I saw Yamazoe.
これ。
どう思うよ、タクル。
Oh, there she is.
他人の空にっていう感じじゃないの？
ウキちゃん本人だよね、やっぱり。
となると成長ホルモンの異常かな。
みんな、ウキちゃんが起きたわよ。
本当？おう、連れてきてくれ。
Such a hard time pronouncing her name correctly with the pitches right. That in Yui and Yuto. Yuto.
ちょっと父さん。
It's just hard.
おうじゃないわ。ウキちゃんの前でそんな声出しちゃダメよ。もっと優しい。
これで普通の声なんだがな。
いいから優しくする。
はい。
Dad glared at her and started mumbling about how he hadn't raised her to be like this again.
ウキちゃん、さ、入って。
After a long pause, a small girl entered the room, shaking a little. Kurusu took her hand and walked her over to a chair, then sat her down.
ウキちゃん、おはよう。
She flinched when she heard Yui's cheerful voice.
わからないよね。6年前の私しか知らないもんね。
Yui took out the class photo and pointed to herself.
ほら、これ私だよ。橘ゆい、覚えてる？
Tachibana Yui.
橘ゆいさん。
Yui. Yamazawa Uki-chan looked at the girl in the photo, then at Yui. Then she gave a little start of surprise.
思い出してくれた？はい。お久しぶりです。もう同級生なんだから敬語とかやめてよ。でも
Dad typed something else to his computer as he watched them.
決まりだな。
そうだね。
There was no doubt about it now. Yamazawa Uki was definitely Yui's old classmate. That would go a long way toward tracking down her family.
けどすごいよ。まさか本当にユキちゃんだったなんて。
We were surprised, but Yui seemed to be the most surprised of all. Her missing classmate had suddenly shown up at her home, and her brother and sister brought her there. And she looked exactly the same as she had 6 years ago.
ウキちゃん、ちょっと話いいかい？
She must have seen Dad's white coat and gotten nervous, because she suddenly sat up straight.
何か遺伝的な病気とか言われたことは？成長が止まってしまうとか。
よくわかりません。すみません。
じゃあ君の背が伸びなくなったのはいつか覚えているかな？ユイと同じクラスだった頃はどうだい？
すみません。それもわかりません。でも私自信があってからなんか変になって。
そうか、あの地震の後だね。
はい。
はあ、やっぱり PTSD で成長ホルモンが、いや、あるいはターナー症候群みたいな染色体異常って可能性もあるが。
A chromosomal disorder found in women. Primary symptoms include delayed or absent development of secondary sexual characteristics, a lack of menstrual period, organ malformations, and decreased height. Oh, intersex! He's suggesting that she's intersex. Intersex representation?
こればっかりは、しかるべきところでちゃんと検査をしなきゃわからんな。
Dad made some adjustments to her chart as he whispered to himself. The look on his face was far more serious than he usually let us see. Yuto poked his head through the door. He must have been standing in the hallway the whole time and looking in on us.
ユウト、そろそろ行かないと学校遅刻するわよ。
そうだよ、ユウ。
大丈夫、すぐ行くよ。
He seemed a little scared by his sister's scolding. But he summed up his courage and came inside, then stuck his hand out toward Uki.
これ、あげる。
In his hands was a tiny chocolate bar. It was the kind of chocolate you could buy in huge packs for cheap at the supermarket.
はい、ありがとうございます。こら、ユウ、ウキちゃんは年上なんだよ。そういう言い方はダメでしょ。
年上？
Yuto looked very confused and a little unsatisfied.
どうしたの、ウキちゃん？
はい、なんだか不思議な気分です。こういうことに慣れていないので。こういうことって？こうして家族が集まってみんなでお話ししたりです。
君の家族はどうしたんだ？
Shinjo-san had said that she wouldn't tell him anything, but maybe in this environment she'd be more willing to talk.
私が小さい時に私を先生たちのところに置いて行ってしまいました。
My eyes narrowed when I heard her say the doctors. She's probably talking about the scientists in that underground facility. And then she'd become a victim of their human experiments, just like Minamizawa Senri. Why had her parents done something so horrible to her?
君はそれからずっとあの地下施設に？
はい。
どうして逃げなかったんだ？
お母さんにどこにも行くなと言われたので。そんなのひどい。
Yui put her hand up to her mouth. I could feel the rage boiling over within me.
この子は僕と同じだ。
Her parents had ignored her ever since she was a small child, and eventually they just disappeared. But despite that, she wasn't able to get away from them.
君はそこで実験の被害者。いや、みんなの世話をしていたけど、それはなぜ？
地震のせいです。
There was sadness in her eyes as she remembered the people that had vanished.
地震で先生たちは病院からいなくなってしまいました。皆さんのお世話をしていた看護の人たちもです。だから代わりに私がお世話をするようにと病院から言われて。
学校はどうしたんだい？君が今着ているのは碧峰学園の制服だろ？年齢から考えて中等部に在籍してると思うんだが。
碧峰学園？
私たちが通ってる学校よ。ウキちゃんはうちの生徒なのよね。
But Yamazawa shook her head.
これお友達が着てたものです。
友達？
はじめ地下で皆さんのお世話をしていたのは私だけじゃなくて、もう一人同じ年くらいのお友達がいました。時々この服を着ていて、私可愛いねってずっと言ってたんです。
ああ、もしかしてその子、君と違って外から通ってきてた？
はい。
なるほど。碧峰の生徒だったのはそっちの子か。
彼女、最初は私と一緒にお仕事をしてたんですけど、だんだん具合が悪そうになって、お休みも多くなってきて、そしたらある日、これをプレゼントしてくれたんです。自分にはもう必要ないから、代わりに大切に着てねって。
Yamazawa looked down at her shoes.
だから、このお洋服は私の大事な宝物です。いつも綺麗にして着ています。
When I saw her expression, I understood. Her friend probably knew that she was dying. She'd been a victim of the same horrible experiments of Minamizawa and Yamazawa and had gone sick as a result.
それじゃあ、君が老人を連れて外を。
タクル、
Kurusu interrupted me gently.
一度にいろいろ聞くのはやめましょう。
あ、
ウキちゃん、辛いこともいっぱいあると思うし、また夜にでもね。
そうだよな。
それに朝ごはんだってまだだものね。お腹すいたでしょ？
いえ、私はそんな。
There was a cute little rumble from her tummy. She gasped a little in embarrassment and turned red.
父さんもそれでいいかしら。
ああ。なあ、ウキちゃん。このお姉ちゃんはちょっと辛いが、飯だけはうまい。上で食べてくるといい。
父さん
Kurusu pursed her lips as she took Yamazawa's hand and stood up.
これチョコレートもう一個あげる。
ありがとうございます。
As she left, Yuto quickly gave her another piece of chocolate. At lunchtime, Ito and I were heading to the club room.
じゃあ、あの山添ウキって子、今は青葉寮にいるのか？
ああ、この先どうなるかわからないけど、なんとかしてやりたいとは思ってるんだ。
けどまさかゆいちゃんの同級生とはな。
うん、驚いた。
でもまあよかったんじゃねえの？
よかったって？
ゆいちゃん喜んでたんだろ？
ああ、そういうことか。確かに。
Yui had really looked happy this morning. Normally, she probably tried her hardest to play the role of being Yuto's big sister, but she was still only in middle school. If she ran into a friend, of course it would make her happy.
何がおかしいんだよ。
いや、 お前口ではなんだかんだ言いながら結構大事にしてるからな、今の家族のこと。
そんなんじゃ
I
ないっ
don't
て。
care about my family. Why would I care about my family? I'm too normal to care about my family.
照れるなって。お前にとってもいいことなんじゃねえの、そういう存在がいるってことは。
僕は別に照れてなんか。っていうかそんなことどうでもいいんだよ。ほら早く部室行こう。尾上や有村や和樹にも山添のことを話さなきゃ。
Of course, I'd already told everyone to come for an emergency meeting. They should be in the room already.
というわけで今山添雨季って子は青葉寮で保護されてる。
タク、大活躍だったんだね。
いやそれほどでも。
The girls all seemed very impressed. Seneca was squeezing her ghetto froggy strap in lieu of applause. It still sounded like nothing it was supposed to, and honestly, I would have preferred the applause. But I was used to it now, I guess.
ダメよセリカ、カズキ。あんまりおだてるといい気になってまた無茶なことするから。
しないって。
Sheesh. I appreciate that she's worried about me, but Kurusu a little too protective. I really wish she stopped saying that stuff when everyone else is around. It's embarrassing.
けど気持ちいいっすね。今頃新庄さんや久野里さん悔しがってますよ。ざまあみろです。プップップ。
有村は前から知ってたのか、山添のこと。
ええ、まあ電話でちょっと話したくらいですけどね。彼女フリージアでは肝心なことはほとんど喋らなかったみたいですよ。多分久野里さんたちを怖がってたんでしょうね。
まあそうだろうな。
それに比べてあの子、宮代先輩の前では割と素直だったみたいですね。先輩ってとぼけた顔して実は女の子の扱いがうまかったりするんですか？
Arimura grinned. Of course I do. I've read every issue of Cool Cat Press that I can find. I couldn't actually say that though, so I didn't.
違うよ。クルスとユイがいてくれたから。
当たり前じゃないですか。何本気にしてるんです？気持ち悪いですよ。
She is a riot. I was never going to get used to this. For one thing, no matter how hard I tried to glare at her, she just smirked in response. I was trying to think of a good comeback when the door to the club room suddenly opened. The door opened softly, but it was clear the person standing in front of it was furious. Funosato.
おい。
Speak of the devil! Funosato was there, and the light in her eyes was as cold and fierce as ever. Instead of yelling, her voice was low and threatening. I figured that she'd eventually find out we were the ones who'd taken Yamazoe, but I didn't expect her to come here so soon.
お前、どういうつもりだ?
What you gonna do, bitch? What you gonna do? She's already at the orphanage! I mean, at the dorm. My bad.
あいつは重要な証拠なんだ。勝手なことをするな。
Funosato stomped over to me and grabbed me by the lapel. Her arms were so thin that I didn't know where she got the strength from. It was like she was filled with some kind of raw hatred that gave her power.
ちょっとやめてください。暴力反対です。
Seneca and Kurusu grabbed her and tried to pull her off, but she held on to me tightly.
僕は無理にあの子を連れて帰ったわけじゃないです。
何？
彼女はうちに来るのを望んだんです。あなたたちのところには行かないって言ったんですよ。
That was only a half-truth, but I felt like I had to say it anyway.
大体証拠って何なんですか？彼女は物じゃないです。実験動物でもないです。だからあなたには渡せません。
何も知らないくせに、貴様。
Her hand gripped me tighter. What the hell's going on? What's wrong with this woman? I felt a powerful rage building up within me. There was a low buzzing in my ears, and Kurusu and Setika's shouts suddenly seemed to be very far away. And then I saw my D sword. And it was clearer than it had ever been before. Her face suddenly twisted in pain. I looked at her with blurry eyes and saw that a red mark had formed on her pale white wrist, as if something was digging into it. She was gritting her teeth, and her breathing made it seem like she was trying to endure some kind of incredible pain, but she still refused to let me go. Arimura's scream sounded like it was coming from underwater. The new, violent temptations within me had almost taken control. What's she trying to do? What she's trying to do is wrong. I'll get rid of her myself. That righteous anger combined with a maddeningly sweet feeling of omnipotence overflowed from within me and refused to stop. With this power, I can do anything I want. That's right, do it. Just kill the bitch. I heard Kurusu yell in my ear. At the same time, I felt a strong slap across my cheek. And then Kunosota-san and I were pulled apart. I suddenly regained control of my senses. Kurusu, Ito, and Serika had grabbed me and were holding me back, while Arimura and Kazuki were doing the same to Kunosato. She deserved it, honestly. He just gave as good as he got. Kunosato-san looked at me with eyes full of hatred, then pushed Arimura and Kazuki away. Serika quickly grabbed them and held them up.
大丈夫？うん。ありがとう、セリ。
もうやめてください、Kunosato-san.
Can't get angry at people for not knowing what's going on. Like, you can't do that. Now it was the Empress's turn to get mad.
お帰りください。ここは部外者がいていい場所ではありません。
She was clenching her hands into fists so tightly that they turned white, standing between Kunosato and the rest of us as if she was some kind of guardian.
あなたが何のつもりで、うちのタクルやウキ、それから有村さんにひどい仕打ちをするのかは知りません。でも、私、
お前の許可などいるか。今実際に見ただろ。能力者は危険な。
今すぐお引き取りください。
Kurusu's voice left no room for discussion. Neither of them moved a muscle for a moment.
ちょっと待ってくれ。ストップだ。ストップ。
And then we heard panting coming from the hallway.
どこへ行ったのかと思えば、やっぱりここか、Kunosatoさん。
It was Shinjo-san. He must have been running for a while because his hair was messed up and there was sweat on his forehead.
俺に任せてくれと言わなかったか？
あんたの悠長なやり方では大切な証拠が消されてしまう。
焦るのはわかるが、物には言い方というものがだな。申し訳ない、クルスさん。俺たちは何も揉めたくて来たわけじゃないんだ。
じゃあ、何のご用ですか？
そう怖い顔をしないでくれるかな。
Shinjo-san looked at both of them troubled, and then he turned toward me.
なあ、宮代君。君の言いたいことはわかる。昨日、ウキ君を連れ去ったことも別に責めたりしない。確かに俺たちが間違っていたかもしれん。だから、今日はちゃんと頼みに来た。ウキ君と、あと、できれば君と有村さんも叱るべき場所で一度検査を受けてほしいんだ。
は
あ？ Arimura responded before I could.
新庄さんこそ頭ん中見てもらったらどうですか？はーい、私喜んで実験台になりますなんて言うとでも思います？
話は最後まで聞いてくれ。これは本当に君たちのためなんだよ。
His next words came as a shock to me.
実は今しがた、 佐久間先生に相談をしてきたんだ。
父さんに？
Both Kurusu and I shouted at the same time.
君たちはその久野里さんのやり方が気に入らないんだよな。だったら佐久間先生の友人の病院ならどうだ？
おい、何を勝手
Shut
に
the
決めて。
fuck up!
久野里さん、
Shinjo-san put up a hand to cut her off.
わかるだろ。そうしなきゃ彼らは検査になんて応じないよ。ちゃんと君も同席させるから。
Kunosato-san furrowed her brow in anger, then turned around and left the room. How the fuck is she friends with Kurusu from Steins Gate? Like, she's just obnoxious, aggravating, violent, and so aggressive and hostile. Like, how does she get any work done? Absolutely no one would want to work with her. And you know what? There's no reason why you should keep around someone this abusive, even if they are a quote-unquote genius. Just fucking throw her out. If she can't work with people, then what the fuck? There are plenty of there's billions of people on the planet. You're telling me that this genius is someone you absolutely need to keep around? Absolutely not. She can fuck off. Get absolutely no opportunities, not until she changes her attitude. Shinjo-san waited until he couldn't hear her footsteps anymore and then sighed a little in relief. Then he continued, and actually, this adult needs to step up. He needs to tell her to shut the fuck up and to stop acting this way and to change her attitude. Like, you're the adult in the room. You should know better. Stop pretending that you're scared of this fucking teenage girl. Come on, she's weak shit. Absolutely not.
ということでどうだろうな、宮代君、有村さん。何でも佐久間先生、以前は大学の医学部で准教授をしていたらしいじゃないか。
I didn't know that. Kurusu must not have known it either because she looked over at me confused. Wait, what do you say again? Was once an assistant professor at the University Medical Department.
父さんが准教授？
知らなかったな。
ただの変なおじさんだと思ってた。
おいおい、まああのルックスじゃそう思われるかもしれないけど。
Shinjo-san laughed, seemingly in sympathy with my dad.
佐久間先生の友人なら信頼できると思うんだけどな。どうだろう。
私はどっちにしても嫌ですよ。
そう言うと思った。
Shinjo-san chuckled. He had probably been anticipating that response.
でもな、有村さん、佐久間先生の話だと君らの能力は身体に対して良くない影響を与えているかもしれないそうだよ。
え？
山添浮君に会ってくるといい。あれで14歳というのは明らかにおかしいと思うんだ。なあ、宮代君。
It was true that Yamazoe looked the same as she did in her old school pictures. It was like the passage of time had stopped for her. If that was caused by her powers?
浮君に関しては絶対に精密検査をすべきというのが佐久間先生の意見だ。そのついでに宮代君と有村さんも異常がないか見てもらったらどうだろう。まあ人間ドックだと思えばいい。それでもダメかな。
Arimura was still unsure, it seemed, but what happened to Yamazoe must have bothered her.
少し考えさせてください。
ああ、それで構わない。
まだ OK したわけじゃないですよ。
Put a muzzle on Kunosato. Forbid her to speak.
ん？
I looked out the door where Kunosato-san had just left.
父さんが必要だと言うなら検査を受けてもいいです。けどその途中でもし久野里さんがその山添や有村を実験動物みたいに扱ったりしたら。
I hesitated for a second, unsure of what to say, but then I continued.
僕だって怒ります。能力を使ってその検査なんかできないよう めちゃくちゃにしてやりますから、覚えておいてください。
Oh, look at him be assertive.
おいおい。
As he should.
ダメよ、何言ってる
Oh,
の。
come on, they need him. He can demand what he wants. Everyone was shocked to see me act so differently than usual, but I remember the sense of power of omnipotence that I just felt and shivered a little. I was right. I could do it. I would do it. If I had to, I could do what I just did.
了解だ。検査中は俺が注意をしておく。それでいいだろ？
Shinjo-san sighed a little and shook his head. He was probably trying to come up with a way to keep Kurosato-san quiet and not having much luck.
それじゃあ部活中のところお邪魔したね。
He went to leave the room, but just before he stepped into the hallway, he turned around.
あっといけない。もう一つ大事な話があったんだ。久野里さんのせいで忘れるところだった。
何でしょうか。
It was clear from Kurusu's voice that she was still upset. Shinjo-san may have been used to dealing with Kurosato-san, but the Empress was a whole different beast altogether. He flinched a little.
宮代くんと尾上さん、あと伊藤くんにちょっとね。
私ですか？
俺、何も悪いことしてないっすよ。
してないです。
君たち病院の地下へ不法侵入したじゃないか。
You can't prove that.
あれはですね。
No, just say you didn't do it. He can't prove that. He's asking because he doesn't have any proof. Just say no.
というか、それを言ったら新庄さんや久野里さんだって。
And they didn't have a warrant either.
その通りだ。だから今のは冗談として。
You're so funny, detective.
冗談になってね。
本気でびっくりしちゃったよ。
聞きたいことっていうのは実はその地下施設のことでね。
Shinjo-san's voice dropped several decibels as he continued.
久野里さんの話だと施設の PC に南沢千里という女の子のデータがあったというんだが。
I heard Kurusu gasp a little. Shinjo-san didn't know about Kurusu and Minamizawa though, so he just looked confused for a moment before quickly continuing.
久野里さんは君たちも一緒に見たと証言してる。覚えはあるかな？
Suddenly hearing that name almost brought back the trauma, but...
はい、見ました。
データは確かにあったんだね。
はい。
そうか。
Shinjo looked at Ito and Sarika too. They both nodded.
ならこれを確認してほしい。証拠品でね、実物を持ってくるわけにはいかなかったんだが。
He put his hand in his pocket and took out a photo. It showed what looked like an ID card. Damn, she's just 2 years older than me. Couldn't believe my eyes. The card looked old and it was dirty and scratched in spots. But the name and face on it were clearly visible.
Minamizawa Senri?
That's right. The name Minamizawa Senri was displayed under the ID number. The expressionless face in the picture was, without a doubt, the girl I'd seen in the basement.
どうだろう。同姓同名の別人ってことはないかな。久野里さんはこの子に間違いないと言ってるんだが。
間違いないです。
俺もそう思います。
私も。
All three of us answered instantly. Shinjo-san nodded and put the picture back in his pocket.
そうか。ありがとう。
その子、南沢千里さんがどうかしたんですか？
I asked, trying to say it in a way that wouldn't bother Kurusu.
ゆうべ、そうだな。ちょうど君が浮くんを青葉寮に連れて行ってしまった頃か。新鮮駅付近を警ら中だった巡査2名が連続放火事件の容疑者らしき女を発見した。
っていうと、私たちを襲ったパイロキネシストですか？
あ、君らの証言や有村さんに協力してもらった似顔絵と特徴が一致していたそうだ。何よりも火を使ったらしいからね。
Then why is Kurusu insisting that she's dead? And why does she have like a headstone? Or why is her name etched on the monuments for all the victims of the earthquake? Supposedly, I'm told. Those words probably meant.
逃げられたんですね。
職務質問をしようと近寄った途端にやられた。一人は重度の熱傷で今病院の ICU にいる。もう一人の巡査は女を取り押さえようと揉み合いになった。結局彼も手足を焼かれ重傷なんだが、その時女が落としたのが。
He patted the photo in his pocket.
は？
That woman had Minamizawa Senri's ID card? Why?
それって宮代を襲った犯人がってことですか
Suddenly there was a loud crash. I turned and saw that Kurusu had gone deathly pale, and had grabbed a table to keep herself from falling over. Her teacup was lying shattered on the table. The sound was probably from when she dropped it.
クルス？
先輩、大丈夫？
ええ、ごめんなさい。ちょっとめまいがしたものだから。
座ってろ、副部長。
ありがとう。
Kazuki dragged a chair over for her to sit in, and she collapsed down on top of it. Shinjo-san seemed to realize that something was wrong. He hesitated a moment, and then asked in as soft a tone as he could muster.
クルスさん、もしかして君も南沢千里のことを何か知っているのか？
新庄さん、そのことは。
平気よ、タクル。
Kurusu looked up at him and cut me off. And then she told him how Minamizawa Senri was her childhood friend and that she was being used as a test subject in the experiments conducted in the basement. And finally...
でも、千里は渋谷地震の被災者として慰霊碑にも名前が刻まれています。犯人であるはずがありません。
That's how she finished.
そうですよ。あの地震の犠牲になったんだろうって久野里さんも言ってましたし。
I quickly added. Shinjo-san thought for a moment and then spoke, even more gently than before.
クルスさん、よく話してくれたね。ありがとう。彼女の死の記録が事実かどうかは今警察で再調査を進めている。その状況次第では申し訳ない。改めて署の方で話を聞かせてもらうかもしれない。
構いません。何かの間違いだと信じてますけど。
There was no doubt in her voice. Shinjo-san chuckled a little.
君の友達を疑いたくはないが、因果な商売でね。犯人の正体はともかく、宮代君と有村さん、君らはまた狙われる可能性がある。用心だけはしていてくれ。
やっぱりそうですかね。
君たちは能力者だとバレてしまったんだ。何かあったらすぐに連絡を。24時間いつでも構わない。あと南沢千里の件に関しては警察から正式に発表があるまで外部に漏らさないでくれ。真偽がはっきりするまでマスコミあたりに騒がれたくない。頼んだよ。
Shinjo-san took one last worried look at Kurusu and then left the room. Everyone fell silent, lost in their own thoughts. In the end, we canceled the club meeting, and Kurusu went to the student council to finish up her work. She was still pale. We all got ready to go, but for some reason, no one actually left. Seneca and Arimura were flipping through magazines. Kazuki was still silently playing ESO2. Ito and I were thinking about the case and glancing occasionally at the map on the wall. There was a new sticky memo in the map. While I was trying to decide if she should add it, Kurusu had written it down and copied it herself. Her normally beautiful handwriting was a little unsteady. She'd probably been shaking as she wrote it.
南沢千里か。
ああ。
確かに似てたな。 ID カードにあった子供の頃の写真と有村の証言の似顔絵。
Arimura looked up from her magazine. She was staring at me. She didn't say it aloud, but it was obvious that she was trying to tell me that she thought so too. I thought back to when we'd been attacked by the pyrokinetic. She was a lot older, but if the girl in that ID card grew up, she might look like that. Yeah.
それじゃ僕らを襲ったのは。いや、でもそんな。
なんかもう少し情報らしきものがあればな。
もしかすると、あの子なら何か知ってるかもしれない。
あの子？
ああ。
I hesitated for a moment, but then realized that we weren't getting anywhere as things stood, so I held out my hand toward Ito.
悪いが、スマホ貸してくれ。
お前、まだ新しいの手に入れてないのかよ。
もうじき買うよ。サンキュー。
I took the phone from Ito and dialed the number. After a few rings, I heard a voice I knew well. It was a gruff voice that I'd heard almost every day lately.
はい、青葉いいんです。
もしもし、父さん。僕だけど。
おお、タクルか。どうした？
あのさ、山添さんなんだけど、今どうしてるかなと思って。
ああ、今診察室のベッドで点滴をしてる。軽い栄養失調が見られてな。お前が言うようにかなり劣悪な環境にいたんだろう。
今って電話に出られるかな？
眠ってはいないから大丈夫だとは思うが、ちょっと待ってろ。
I could hear him get farther away from the phone. A second later, I heard a loud, high-pitched girl's voice.
ちょっとタクル兄、ウキちゃんは治療中なんだから邪魔しちゃダメだよ。
お前の大声の方が治療の邪魔じゃないのか。
Yui had probably been so worried about Yamazoe that she'd raced home after school. It was great to see her being such a good friend, but right now it was a huge nuisance.
ああ、いいから山添さんに代わってくれ。大事なようなんだ。
後じゃいけないの？
これ絶対に内緒な。できればクルスには聞かせたくない話なんだ。お前も黙ってろよ。
There was silence on the line for a moment as she thought, but eventually she reluctantly agreed.
わかった。待ってて。
Since it was just me, she probably didn't feel the need to put the call on hold. I could hear doors opening and closing as she went to the exam room. There was some whispering, and then I heard another girl's voice.
もしもし。
ああ、急にごめんな。具合良くないのか？
大丈夫です。私は平気だと言ったんですが、佐久間先生とゆいさんが心配してくださって。
そっか。
I was relieved to hear that she wasn't in bad shape. What I was about to ask might be bad for her, mentally.
な、もしかして、南沢千里って子知ってたりしないか？
はい。
南沢千里。記録によると、渋谷自身まで君と同じ施設に通っていたはずなんだ。年齢は、6年間だから、12歳くらいかな。
南沢千里さん。
そうだ。どんなことでもいい。彼女について何か覚えていることはないか？
南沢さん。南沢さん。
She seems to be trying her best to remember. I saw that the rest of the newspaper club, not just Ito but Serika, Arimura, and Kazuki as well, were staring at me and trying to hear the conversation. Yamazoe thought a little more before she spoke.
直接会ったりお話ししたことはないです。でも何度か治療室に入っていく姿を見かけたことがあります。あの子は私よりも辛い治療をしてるって。だから私も頑張るようにって先生に言われました。
I remember the experiments I'd seen as a little kid, as well as the tiny girl crying for help. I shivered. But Yamazoe had it far worse than I did. She'd actually been exposed to the same torture that Minamizawa Senri was.
ごめんな。嫌なこと思い出させて。いい
え、私はそれが嫌なことだとは思っています。
そっか。他に何か覚えていることはないか？
あ ですね。南沢さんは随分と足が悪かったみたいです。
足？
はい、私が見かけた時はいつも片足を引きずっていて、先生に支えられるようにして治療室へ入っていきました。
片足を引きずって？
なので私はてっきり施設で足の治療をしているんだと思っていたのですが。
Dragging her leg? Wasn't that the same thing the pyrokinetic was doing?
宮代さん。
いや、ごめん。また何かあったら聞くよ。ありがとう。
はい、それではゆいさんに電話を
そのまま切っちゃってくれ。うるさいから。じゃあまた後で。
She's being annoying. Oh my god.
ちょっと、なんか聞こえたよ。うるさいって何？
I hung up the phone before she could finish and handed it back to Ito. Then I looked at the map again. I saw the 2 notes that Kurusu had written with a shaky hand. Pyrokinetic found. Has Senri's ID card. Pyrokinetic equal killer. Killer might be Senri.
あの女は本当に南沢千里なのか？
でも彼女はもうこの世にはいないんだろ。副部長が言うように慰霊碑にも名前があるし。
なあ、でも地下で見たデータでは行方不明になってた。
だからそれは。
そう、新庄さんにも言ったけど、僕はそれが彼女の死を意味すると思い込んでいた。クルスもそう言ってたし。けどもしそれがデータ通り本当に行方がわからないだけだとしたら。
どういうこと？
Sedika was looking between me and the map in confusion.
おのえも覚えがあるだろ。AH 東京総合病院は渋谷地震の時災害拠点病院の一つになっていた。
そうなるとちょっと変ですね。慰霊碑に名前があるってことはどこかの病院あるいは警察で彼女の死亡が正式に確認されたってことですもんね。
だろ？あんな実験までやっていた連中が大事な被験者の死亡情報を見逃すはずがない。
確かに行方不明なんて書かないよな普通。
Ito crossed his arms in thought.
ってことは死亡したっていう情報が間違い、もしくは嘘か。
新庄さんは多分それを疑ってる。南沢千里という子はまだ生きていて、そして僕たちを狙ってるってことだ。
The red sun was about to sink below the buildings on the horizon. I looked out the window and saw that the sunlight had illuminated the clouds and formed a brilliant twilight. But soon it would disappear, and then the cold night would come.
でもさ、仮に犯人が南沢千里だとして、なんでお前を襲うよ。
それはわからない。なぜか能力者を恨んでいて、たまたま僕が引っかかったのか。
だったらわざわざニュージェネの狂気事件をなぞる必要なくね？宮代の推論通り犯行に何かメッセージがあるとすれば別だけどな。
Some kind of message. Back then, when Minamizawa Senri had begged me for help, I'd left her there. I was just a kid, what could I do? No matter how much I told myself that, she probably wouldn't agree. She probably thought it was a ray of hope, but I'd left her there and ran away. It wouldn't surprise me if the memories of that turned to hatred and rage that she would never forget. And after she was set free during the Shibuya earthquake, she attacked me.
Huh?
Suddenly, I remember the time when she'd attacked me. That smile on her face had chilled me to the bone, and she'd said to me,
見つけた。
まさか復讐？
Is this whole thing Minamizawa Senri's way of getting revenge on me?
そんなわけあるか。
I realized what I was thinking and slapped my hands against my cheeks to drive the thought out of my mind. Yeah, it's a little egotistical.
本当にいいの？
おお、任せろや。
やったよ、ウキちゃん。今日から一緒に暮らせるって。
After we got back, Kurusu and I were met with some good news.
はい、よろしくお願いします。もう ら敬語はいらないってば。
Shinjo-san had come in the afternoon, and that's what he'd worked out. There were several reasons. First, Frisia couldn't keep her anymore, but due to her power, it would be difficult to give her to a normal orphanage. Second, Shinjo-san was taking a different route than the other officers on this case, so he said he couldn't give her to a police facility. And the most important thing of all was that this was what Yamazoe wanted. Having her old friend Yui here seemed to be helping her a lot.
よかったわね、ウキちゃん。
She blushed a little and nodded.
父さんもありがとう。
なーに、むしろこっちがありがたいってもんだ。誰かさんと違ってとっても気が利くし、家事の手際もいい。もう少し元気になったら委員の手伝いもしてくれるって言うし、大助かりだ。
父さん、それは私に対する当てつけと考えていいの？
Yui pouted, but Dad just laughed and ran his hands through her hair.
部屋はどこにしようかしら。今空いてるところってないわよね。
私と一緒でいいでしょ？ね。
そういうわけにはいかないわ。ユウとはどうするの？
別にいいじゃない。平気よね、ユウ。
ほら、ユウと困ってるでしょ。ダメよ。
だったら僕の部屋は？
嘘。タクルに言ってもやらしい。
いくらなんでもそれはまずいだ。
違うよ、そういう意味じゃなくて。
Once this case was settled, I intended to leave, so I could sleep with the dining room or something, and she could have my room. But Kurusu seemed to know exactly what I was thinking, and she poked me in the stomach.
なんだよ。
ダメですからね。また勝手に出て行ったら。
ここにいるのは事件が終わるまでって約束したろ。
そうだけど、あなたがだらしないからよ。一人暮らしなんて気が気じゃないって何度も言ってるでしょ。
Dad suddenly slapped his hands together.
ああ、そうだ。一つ部屋が空いてるじゃないか。
How do you even forget that you have a spare room?
ほら、今は使ってないが、以前ナースの宿直室だった。
あそこって物置じゃない、今。
でもな、日当たりもいいし、物置にしとくのはもったいないと思ってたんだ。
そう思ってたのなら、もっと早く片付けてほしかったわ。
Kurusu sighed and turned to me.
明日、部屋の片付けをしましょう。手伝ってね。はーい。
Yuto answered cheerfully.
でも今夜はどうしようか。ユイとウキちゃんが一緒で、ユウとは父さんとでいい？
よし、決まり。布団用意しなきゃ。ユウ、手伝ってくれる？私、自分でやりますから。大丈夫。ウキちゃんは何がどこにあるのかまだ分かってないでしょ。あと、敬語はいいってば。はい。だから、そこははいじゃなくて、うんうん。ね、言ってみて。でも、私も手伝うので。そう？それじゃあ一緒に。
ああ、ちょっと待ってくれ。
I stopped Yamazoe before Yui could take her out of the room.
どうしたの、タクルに？
山添、新庄さんから話は聞いたけど、もう一回だけ確認させてくれないかな。
はい。
僕のスマホ、今どこにあるか本当に知らないんだよな。
スマホ？ほら、こういうのだよ。
Yui took out her phone and showed it to her. When Yamazoe saw it, she finally seemed to remember.
新庄さんが見せてくれた電話機のことですね。あれは、落ちていた場所に戻したんです。
その後、誰が拾ったのかわからないか？
はい、すみません。
そっか。
So it's just like Shinjo-san had said after all. Then who exactly had my phone and the picture inside it? And how had they been able to call Ito's phone?
タクルに、もういい？話は終わり？
ああ、
それじゃあ寝る準備しに行こう。父さん、とりあえず病院の使ってもいいよね。
おう、この前干してからまだ使ってないやつがあったろ。あれ使え。あとシーツも。
分かってるって。あ、そうだねえ、ウキちゃん、お風呂も一緒に入らない？はい。だからはいじゃないでしょ。言っとくけど、ユウは別だからね。
わかってるよ。
ユイのやつ、ずいぶんとはしゃいで
Hi,
るな。
Lapanda Blase. How you doing? Yeah, it has been so long. Thanks
そう
for
ね
stopping by.
でもわかるわ。やっぱりお友達っていいものよ。
クルスは大丈夫か？
I'm playing a visual novel. It's a horror visual novel. And then later on, I'm gonna be playing I Was a Teenage Exocolonist, which is super fun. I get to do a lot of voice acting for that one. Yui took Yamazoe and Yuto out of the room. Yeah, fun. I'm about halfway through the first route for this game. It's gonna take so long to get through.
どうして？
ほら、食費とかいろんな世話とか一人分増えるだろ。
世話は平気よ。ウキちゃんはいろいろ手伝ってくれるって言うし、むしろ楽になるくらい。食費とかはまあ父さんが頑張ってくれれば。
おお、任せとけ。ちょっとトイレに。
Dad quickly ran out of the room to escape Kurusu's gaze.
まあ。
She chuckled, but there was a kindness in her laugh. Ooh! Ami, how is Miyashiro? Oh, this is October 18th. Whoa! Whoa! What the fuck is happening? Hey. Who is Max Katie? Why did it move on before I was done? I don't have auto on. Hold up. Let me go back. I have cause YouTube. I can look at it. At what was being said. Okay, okay, it says, it's Ami-chan saying, how is Miyashiro? Max Katie says, completely awakened. Shall I do it? And then Ami says, more. And Max Katie says, more? And then Ami-chan says, yes, more. More suffering, more regrets, the pain of the abandoned. And for that, more, and then more like 20 times. Because she's dramatic, I guess. And then Max Katie says, as you wish. Okay. Now I can move on. Sunday. Arimura, Yamazoe, and I got a full medical check at a hospital run by one of Dad's friends, just like Shinjo-san had suggested. And now the numbers, brainwaves, electrocardiographs, MRIs, and other images were lined up on Dad's computer screen. Of course, as a complete amateur, I had no idea what any of it meant. Furusato-san was talking to my dad as if she was one of his colleagues, rather than addressing him as the much older man that he was.
おかしなものって何ですか？ただでさえこんな検査されてムカついてるのに。しかも今日って友達と約束あったんですよ。女子同士って一度断ると後々面倒なんですけど。
Arimura put her hands on her hips and complained. Yamazoe, for her part, looked scared. She was hiding behind me and trying to stay out of Kurosato-san's sight.
素人は黙ってろ。邪魔だ。
はあ？冗談じゃないですよ。 ここでちゃんと言っておかないと、この先どんな実験をされるか分かったもんじゃありませんからね。
Someone really needs to just slap Kunosato. Like, stand up to her for real. Fucking punch her out or something. Kick her ass.
そういうことを言うど素人が一番腹が立つ。
なあ有村さん、久野里さん、そうやって一日中喧嘩してて疲れないか？
Kunosato-san is obviously the aggressor, so why are you addressing the both of them like they're equally at fault? What a useless adult. Shinjo-san sighed like he always did. Irresponsibly, like he always did. Arimura's eyes narrowed as she glared at Kunosato-san, who just laughed.
で、佐久間先生、結果はどうでした？
分かったことがあればなるべく早くお願いします。できればこの後買い物に行きたいんで。
ああ、そうするよ。まずウキちゃんの成長阻害因子に関してだが、これはすぐにはわからん。染色体からホルモンの分泌異常まで詳しい結果が出るには時間がかかる。で、タクルと有村さんに関しては体はどこにも異常なし。ただしタクルは食事のバランスが明らかに悪い。特定の栄養素が欠乏してる。これはノノによーく言っとくからな。有村さんは少し甘いものや油を控えた方がいい。
What the fuck?
ジャンクフードも
She
や
is
め
the
ること。
skinniest bitch on the planet. What are you talking about?
確実にメタボへ一直線だ。
No, she's not.
体のことは別にいい。脳はどうなんだ？
And also, who the fuck cares?
ああ、これが MRI だが。
Dad clicked on one of the images, which displayed images of a human brain. Arimura must have found the sight of her own brain creepy because she looked away. Yamazawa didn't seem to know what it was and stared at it from behind me, confused. Kunosato-san clicked through the images slowly, checking each little part in turn, but then finally tossed it away.
3人ともネガティブだな。
ああ、ネガティブだよ。
ネガティブ？嘘、頭悪いってことですか？
I'm gonna guess that the brain swelling is from actually being hit with a delusion. Probably. So if they had just checked, did like an additional test to see if like being hit with a delusion would change the way that the brain looked, maybe they would have gotten a positive result. Arimura would have staggered back as if she'd been given some kind of shocking news. Shut up.
そんな。
いやいや、そういう意味じゃないから。
Dad chuckled a little.
久野里君、君は聞いていた以上に人が悪いね。
ネガティブの意味もわからないようなやつはバカと断じていいはずだな。
Oh my god, dude. She's the most annoying character. I can't stand her.
こいつは新庄君の気苦労もわかるね。
Laughed the irresponsible adult.
でしょ？
Shinjo-san gave Dad a tired smile. Oh my god, and now they're acting like there's some sort of camaraderie from their uselessness? That's so cool.
安心していい、有村さん。医学の世界ではネガティブは陰性って意味だ。つまりおかしな症状は出ていないということだよ。
え？
君の脳は至って正常ってことさ。
なんだ、びっくりした。
Arimura sighed with relief, for once acting like a girl her age. Lately, I'd finally understood that this was who she really was. She told me once before that she was always trying to be the person that the people around her wanted her to be.
ギガロマニアックスと脳の肥大化の間には結局因果関係はないのか？
少なくともタクルたちに異常は見られない。君の言うそのギガロなんとかとの関連性は自分で判断してくれ。
Funosato-san frowned and lapsed into thought.
でも 一連の殺人事件の犠牲者には特徴があった。被害者の脳に同一の症状が見受けられた。
Kunosato-san showed Dad her tablet computer. He had several brain scans on it that weren't ours. Arimura looked away again.
これを見ればわかるだろう。どれも大脳新皮質が肥大化している。
ああ、言われれば確かに。
Dad whispered as he looked at the tablet.
肥大化？大きくなってるってこと？
Look, some impossible things happened. It's probably the work of a psychic, and they probably got hit with a delusion, and that's probably why their brains swelled.
まあな。
およそ 1.2 倍といったところか。そこで今回お前たちの脳に同様の症状があるのか見せてもらったわけだが、結果はネガティブだった。お前たちの脳は通常の人間と変わらない。
つまり被害者にだけ脳を肥大化させる特別な何かが起こった。
さあ、それはどうだろうな。この程度なら日常生活に支障のあるレベルじゃない。知性や知能にも影響はないだろう。本人も気づいてなかったんじゃないか。
つまりもともとそういう脳をしていたのか、死の間際に異常をきたしたのか、あるいは脳に異常をきたしたせいで死んだのか、断定はできないということですか。
Dad looked at the tablet and nodded.
そういうことだね。
いずれにせよ考察のためのデータが乏しすぎる。せめてあと 2,3 人被害者が出てくれればいいんだが。
Listen to her. Hoping for 3 more murders to occur. How gentle of her.
だからそういうことを口にするのはやめろ。
Shinjo-san treated it like a joke, but her face was completely serious and terrifying.
っていうか、つまり今日の私たちの検査はあんまり意味がなかったってことですか？
いや、そんなことはないさ。有村さんがすこぶる健康で脳にも異常なしって分かっただけでも収穫じゃないか。
Shinjo-san tried his best to make her feel better, but
私に向かって心にもないこと言っても無駄ですよ。これだから有村は厄介だって思いましたね、今。
he thinks that she's a hassle? That is rich.
そんなことあるわけ。
Shinjo-san gave up and lowered his head.
すまん。
ああ、せっかくの休みが潰れちゃった。私そろそろ行きますね。
Arimura grabbed her bag and tried to leave.
ちょっと待て。
But she turned around at the door when Kunosato-san stopped her.
何ですか？
最後にもう一つ手伝え。お前の能力が必要だ。
嫌です。
だから久野里さん、物には頼み方というものが。
You can't ask someone for a favor and act like this. But Kunosato-san ignored him.
山添由紀の能力についてちゃんと聞いておきたい。
Yamazoe shivered and hid behind me. Dad saw her and frowned in a way that only I could notice. Then he said, I'm gonna hit the restroom, and walked past Arimura and out the door. On the way out, he whispered to me.
俺は向こうへ行ってるわ。超能力なんて話は医者の領分じゃねえ。聞いてるだけでこっちの頭が変になりそうだ。
After Dad left, Kunosato-san looked at tiny little Yuki with cold eyes.
山添、お前自身にもよく分かっていないようだが、とりあえず知っていることだけでいい。話してみろ。
Her harsh tone only scared Yamazoe more, but I looked at her and nodded as she tried her best to work up her courage.
私は誰かが心に描いたものを形にしてしまうみたいなんです。
誰かが心に描いたもの？
それは誰の思考でもか？
私の近くにいる人です。
形というのは、つまり 実体化させるということだな。
Kunosato-san took out a penny and showed it to Yamazoe.
そういうものの場合もありますし、そうじゃないものもあります。
そうじゃないものっていうと、
何と言えばいいのかわからないですが、例えば状態を
状態？
綺麗になりたいとか、こうなってほしいとか。
それが現実になるっていうのか？
現実なんでしょうか。私にもよくわかりません。
それは今やろうと思ってできるものなのか？
いえ、意識してできるわけではないです。
どうだ、有村。
Kunosato-san looked over, but Arimura just turned her head.
はいはい、その子嘘はついてませんよ。全部本当みたいです。
無意識のうちに他人の思考や願望をリアルブートしてしまうということだな。
なるほど。それならこの前フリージアから姿を消した方法も説明がつく。百瀬さんの思考がリアルブートされてしまったわけか。
So her power could only real boot other people's thoughts and wishes, but not her own? It was like her own life. She had no hopes of her own and only lived her life for the sake of others. In a way, it was a very sad power.
好むと好まざるとに関わらず能力を発動してしまうという点では、そこにいる有村ひなえと同じ部類だ。能力、
不便で悪かったですね。
で、それはいつからだ、山添。いつからそんな能力を身につけたのかと聞いている。地下施設での実験中にか？
いえ、私は劣等生でしたから。
ならいつだ？
多分渋谷の地震の後からだと。
やはりな。
やはりってのは？
こいつらの話と、あとあんたが調べた被害者たちの過去、それらを総合して考えると、能力に目覚めたと思われる時期がほぼ同じだ。
あの地震が原因だってのか？
まだ仮説だがな。
Kunosato-san started to type something into her tablet.
待ってくれ。地震なんてどこでも頻繁に起こってる。その度にギガロマニアックスが生まれてたらキリがないじゃないか。
いや、私が言っているのは地震そのものじゃない。
あ？
あの時不可思議な現象が渋谷で観測されたのを覚えているか？
The light in the sky? Maybe? Trying to think back to Chaos had Noah. I think there was a blinding light that people saw. I did remember actually.
もしかして、あの白い光ですか？
Yeah, it's the white light. Kunosato-san nodded. That white light. The white light that had covered us right after the Shibuya earthquake. There were a lot of rumors about it, including one that said it was plasma caused by the earthquake. But I'd heard that no one really knew what it was, even now.
驚いたな。久里さんが陰謀論者だとは思わなかった。
Okay, dude. Psychics exist. I think her thinking this is connected is not a conspiracy theory.
陰謀論？ってまさか一時期流行したあれですか？
I was talking about a certain rumor that had gone around right after the earthquake. The rumor said that the earthquake was caused by a secret tectonic weapon experiment, a joint project between the US and Japan that might have gone awry, and that the mysterious light was caused by its explosion. This rumor also said that Chaos Child Syndrome, which was believed to be a form of PTSD, might actually be caused by the materials used in the weapon. The rumor was popular on 8channel for a while, but people quickly got bored of it. By the time I'd woken up from my coma, no one was talking about it anymore. No, it would be more accurate to say that instead of people getting bored of it, someone had done their best to erase all traces of it. At the time, I'd found this strange and started looking into it outside of the internet. Despite the scale of the earthquake, there had been no aftershocks afterward. All the damage had been concentrated in Shibuya, and the epicenter had been observed to be far too shallow. Yet, not a single scientist was speaking up. Whenever someone raised even the smallest doubt, they were quickly shouted down as an idiot conspiracy theorist.
ただの陰謀論だったらいいのだがな。
Sometimes conspiracy theories are real.
というと、
すべての元凶はあの光自体にあるのではないかと私は考えている。
本気で言ってるのか？じゃあ君は光の正体を何だと思ってるんだ？
それが分かれば苦労しない。ただ何者かの手によって引き起こされたものだと私は確信している。
すいません。そういうのは後でやってください。私は早く事件を解決してくれればそれでいいんで。
Arimura saw that Shinjo-san and Kurosato-san were about to start arguing and readjusted her tote bag on her shoulder.
私の仕事はもう終わりですよね。じゃあさようなら。宮代先輩たちもまた学校で。
ああ。
ウキもまたね。てかもっと元気出せよ。
She patted Yamazawa lightly on the head and left the examination room. Yamazawa softly whispered, "Yes, ma'am," as she watched her go. After that, Kurosato-san began to mumble to herself as she started to look at her data on Dad's PC. There was a different look in her eyes than any I'd seen before. To be honest, she looked a little crazy, but it wasn't the look of a mad scientist. It was as if she was concealing some dark obsession. I'd seen these kinds of eyes somewhere before. Where was it? As soon as I remembered, a chill ran down my spine.
あのパイロキネシスト、南沢千里かもしれないあの女の目にそっくりだ。
They were the eyes of someone bent on revenge, consumed by hatred and rage. The Shibuya earthquake and that strange light, and the relationship they likely had with our powers. I rolled around in my bed, thinking about everything that had happened. And then I thought back to the crazy look in Kurosato-san's eyes. She looked just like the pyrokinetic. Does Minamizawa Senri hate me for what I did that day? Does she still hate me even now?
そんなバカな。子供の頃の話だぞ。いくらなんでもそんな昔のことで。
I tried to say it aloud to convince myself, but that pyrokinetic wasn't behaving like a normal person. It was hard to think she was sane. She was a beast, an animal without a conscience that was stalking the streets of Shibuya with bared fangs. At least that's how she seemed to me. And the terrifying words she said when she saw me, she had looked at me and said, "I found you."
結局、僕は知らないうちに自分の命をわざわざ危険にさらすような事件に首を突っ込んでしまってたのか。
The more I thought about it, the more my blood began to run cold. If I'd known this was going to happen, I would have just listened to Kurusu from the beginning.
って何を弱気になってんだ。
I sat up on the bed. That's right. I had my power. And if that woman was Minamizawa Senri, and she was trying to kill me out of revenge, I wouldn't just sit there and let her. But what if she attacked me when I was with Kurusu? And what if things got so dangerous that I couldn't protect my own life or Kurusu's without killing her? Could I really kill Minamizawa Senri right in front of Kurusu? I almost jumped at the sudden noise. The sound was from my new smartphone. I'd finally gotten a new one before I went to the hospital today. I'd totally forgotten. I remembered how Ito had gotten a call from my old phone after I lost it, and hesitated a little. I looked at the screen, trembling. Caller, Ono is Serga.
なんだ、尾上か。もしもし。
ああ、タク？ヤッホー。
どうしたんだよ。
もしかしてご機嫌斜め？今日の検査で何かあった？
そういうわけじゃないけど。
ダメだよ、ごまかしても。そういう声の時のタクはだいたい悩んでる時なんだから。
Evidently, it wasn't just Kurusu and Arimura who could tell when I was lying.
で、何を悩んでたの
？I wasn't sure if I should tell her, but it was Serika I was talking to after all. I told her everything I've been thinking about.
白い光？
あの時、尾上も僕と一緒にいたよな。何か覚えてないか？
I need to go, but it was fun to check up on you again. You're great. Thank you. Have a good day or night, whichever. Thanks for stopping by.
それがね、私倒れて気絶しちゃってたから光とか見てないんだ。ほら、 タクが病院まで運んでくれたでしょ。
Bye!
あ、そういえばそうだったな。
I could still remember how Serika felt when I'd carried her on my back. Until then, I hadn't really treated her differently than any other boy, but at some point she started to grow into a woman. When I carried her on my back, I was surprised. That's what a girl felt like.
あの時はごめんね。ありがとう。
今さらなんだよ。僕とお前の仲だろ。
幼馴染ってやっぱりいいね。
Serika sounded happy, but the tone of her voice quickly dropped.
あ、でも、のんちゃんの幼馴染のあの子は、のんちゃんやタクを悩ませてるんだよね。
お前も気をつけろよ。昔地下施設で南沢千里を目撃したのは僕だけじゃないんだからな。
大丈夫だよ。きっとタクが守ってくれるから。
え？
あれ？もしかして守ってくれないの？
いや、そういうわけじゃない。ただ、
I fell silent, but I could tell that Serika was nodding to herself on the other side of the phone.
ああ、そっか。それで迷ってるんだね。
And then, even though I hadn't said anything, she seemed to realize my problem. Had I really killed someone if it meant saving someone?
でもね、タク。多分のんちゃんなら相手が幼馴染でも親友でもタクを守るためにためらわないでやっつけると思うんだ。もちろん私もだよ。タクのためならどんなことでもするし、誰にも負けないと思う。絶対に。
尾上。
タクはどうかな？
Maybe she was right. Kurusu would probably kill her friend if it was the only way to protect us.
でも、そんなことクルスにさせていいわけない。
If that woman really was Minamizawa Senri, it wasn't Kurusu who needed to do it. It was me, right? That's right. That was the only way to overcome my past trauma too.
あ、でも今日は18日だよね。
どうしたいきなり。
次の事件は
Following Serika's conversations was impossible as ever.
すぐには起きないんじゃないかなって。
すぐに起きない？
I looked at the calendar and then realized.
次は23日か。
Since these killings seem to be following the new gen madness, the next murder would probably be on the 23rd. After that would be finger food on October 28th, and Dokyun puzzle on November 4th. If we could get through the 23rd, we'd be safe for a while.
だからそれまでは安全かも。
とはいえ、23日になったら24時間逃げ回らなきゃいけないんだよな。
だったらその日はみんなで一緒にいようよ。いくら恨みを持ってるからってみんなのいる場所に堂々と出てくるなんてできないんじゃないかな。
なるほど。やっぱりそういう作戦しかないか。
If we could avoid the murderer that way, we'd win.
部活のみんなにも協力してもらって深夜までやってるお店に入っちゃうとか、佐久間先生さえ許してくれれば青葉寮で合宿してもいいかも。
尾上、お前意外と考えてるんだな。
なんかすっごく褒められちゃった。
No, it's not. It's not a compliment at all. Whenever I was in trouble or worried about something, Serika had always been there to listen to me. She was one of the few people who really understood me. Of course, I was too embarrassed to tell her that, and I had no plans to ever do so.
それじゃあタク、おやすみ。いい夢見てね。
ああ、おやすみ。
I hung up and looked at the calendar on the wall again.
10月23日。犯人はどう動き、どんな犯罪を犯すんだろう。それは本当に何らかのメッセージなんだろうか。そして狙われているのはこの僕か。それとも。
Just like we'd expected, nothing happened over the next few days. Wow, how long is this chapter? I thought it would end a few minutes ago, but it hasn't. I think it'll just continue until the chapter's over. There was no sign of that woman and no new arson cases, which meant no news about the case. I knew Judgment Day was drawing near, though, so rather than screwing around like I had been before, I was trying to figure out how to use my power to protect myself and everyone else. Then, in the midst of our everyday lives, with the same unchanging days just repeating, we slowly greeted the dawn of October 23rd.
とりあえず今のところは何もなしか。
ああ、
よかったっすね、宮代先輩。これもわざわざひなえちゃんが付き合ってあげてるおかげっすよ。感謝の印として今度専属屋のマンゴーフルーツパフェご馳走してくださいね。
何言ってんだ。お前だって狙われてるかもしれないだろ。
うわー、ドケチ。
ちょっとみんな気を抜くのが早すぎるわ。問題はこれからなんだから。
Nothing had happened during school. We'd made sure that nobody was alone during break periods, and it had paid off.
なんだ山添。
私も一緒にここにいてよかったんでしょうか。学園の生徒でもないのに。
今日は特別だ。君だって能力者なんだから狙われないとも限らないだろ。
そういうこと。今日が無事に終わるまで絶対に私たちと離れてはダメよ。
Yamazawa seemed uncomfortable in this new environment all day.
で、これからどうすんだ？
そろそろ学校も人が少なくなるし、移動した方がいいわね。
渋谷で遅くまで空いている店へ行こう。悪いけどみんなも付き合ってくれるか？
しょうがないっすね。その代わり宮代先輩のおごりでよろしく。
有村、他のメンバーはともかくお前は割り勘だ。
先輩ひどい。鬼、悪魔。
Call me whatever you want.
それでどこ行くの？
カラオケとか？
できれば懐的に優しいところにしてくれ。
だとすると行き先はいつものあそこだね。
よう来たの。ゆるりと過ごしてゆくがよい。どうも。お主たちか。好きな席に座ってよいぞ。
We chose to see by the window with a good view. Cafe LEX took over a whole floor of a classy two-story business building near Shibuya's residential district. Thanks to the window seat, we were able to see all around the building, and if she showed up, we'd be able to spot that pyrokinetic, Minamizawa Senri, as if that's who she was, immediately.
閉店までここにいられるね。
そのためにはたくさん注文しなきゃ。すみません。
もう一度確認しとくぞ。有村は自腹だからな。
どれ、注文は決まったのか？忙しいからさっさとオーダーするように。
店員さん、忙しいなら私もお店の手伝いをしますので。
は？
こらこら山添、客は手伝わなくていいんだからな。ていうか手伝っちゃダメだからな。
そうなんですか？
そうなんです。
私はここからここまで全部お願いします。
だから有村、どさくさに紛れてそういう注文するな。お前には絶対におごらないからな。お前、何うなってんだよ。
さっき食べたシュークリームのクリームが髪についちゃって。
Oh, I feel this. I get food stuck in my hair all the time. How does she pull that off when she has hair that short?
あ 花ってば大きなあくび。
伊藤もだ。いくらなんでも気を抜きすぎだろ。
それにお行儀が悪いわよ。
んなこと言ったってしょうがないだろ。何時間もただだらっとしてるだけなんだから。
We've been at Cafe LES for 4 hours already. At first, everyone had been tense and alert, but it seemed like we were starting to hit our limits. Arimura and I seemed to be relaxing a little. If we were alone, we would have been afraid, but now we were surrounded by our friends. And if you added in the waitress and the other customers, there were even more people here now. I couldn't imagine someone just barging in and attacking us.
おいこら、お主ら。
The waitress had walked over at some point while I was looking at the window and was standing next to me.
一体何時間粘るつもりじゃ。これ以上注文せんのならいい加減。
ああ、します注文。メニューください。
I guess we had to order extra after all. It was only natural, but it was putting a big dent in my budget for the month.
おれ、メニューじゃ。
ありがとうございます。タク、何頼む？
Seneca took the menu and handed it to me.
そうだな。なるべく安いもの。安いもの。
As I flipped through the menu, I saw...
Huh?
What? Oh! Oh! Oh shit! That's a sumo sticker. What the fuck? Ah! No! I felt horribly dizzy and my vision started to get blurry. I felt horrible. It hurt to breathe. How did this even happen? The 11 Warshaw, which had tortured Arimura and I on the night we were attacked by the pyrokinetic, was right in front of me. Everything started to go dim. Stay strong. Hang in there. Hang in there. Oh! Okay, I managed to get a hold of myself. Nope. No, you didn't. This is a delusion. You're being psychically attacked. What? Where did everybody go? I don't understand. How?
Kurusu Nono. Ito.
Where?
Kazuki. Arimura. Yamazoe.
Oh, this reminds me of Chaos Head Noah. They're gone. Not just my friends, but even the waitress disappeared. Everybody's gone.
誰かいないのか?
I called out to the back of the cafe, but there was no sign that anyone was there.
くそ、なんでだよ.
Oh! It's this image? Ooh. The sound. All of the other sounds had disappeared from the world. The music that had been playing in the cafe was gone, and so were the sounds of the cars that sometimes passed by on the road. There was nothing but strange silence and dark gloom. I could only hear one thing now. The terrifying sounds. She was getting closer. The footsteps were coming up the stairs to the cafe. Shivering with fear, I forced myself to quietly open the doors of the cafe and then snuck out onto the landing. Trembling, I looked down the stairs to the first floor, and there I saw... What? Okay, it's just her. Our eyes met. Our eyes met for an instant. I saw those eyes like cold fire looking up at me from beneath the hair that covered her whole face. I knew it. That was... And almost as if she could sense my fear. Minamizawa Senri looked at me and smiled. It was the smile of a beast that had found its prey. Chapter 8, Betrayal and Entanglement of Erosive Cases. Oh, whoops. Why isn't my... Sometimes my mouse just doesn't work. I need to save. There, let's save here. Okay, I'll be back in 3 hours to play I Was a Teenage Exocolonist. Let's who can I raid right now? Nah. I'll just log off now. Thanks for everyone who came by. I'll be back in a few hours, like I said.